Chapter 936. A Foreign God. Gadotsi paused for a moment. What did this mean? Doctor, are you saying that the Vilo Senior is not Sumer's native god? Wuming was not surprised by Roman's conjecture. After all, he did not intend to hide his identity as a foreign god. Let's not talk about anything else. Just the fact that he has multiple identities in history proves that the Vilo is not a simple existence. At the very least, he is not a native god. Sumer's native gods were born from faith. After the gods retreated, these gods also disappeared. Only Wuming, who was not a native god, could survive in other eras. Of course, it was only a possibility that he could survive in other eras. However, Wuming had left his shadow in many places in history. Cyrus, Sodric, Vilo Cyrus Ed, Hyunryong, even if he was a foreign god, once he accepted the natives' faith, it would still have a serious impact after the gods disappeared. However, Wuming acted as if nothing had happened and left traces in human history. Roman guessed that Wuming's traces probably existed in the modern era as well. It was just that they had not been discovered. After all, Wuming had personally admitted that he was not dead. That's right. Roman's analysis is correct. I am actually a foreign god. Wuming admitted it naturally. You really are a foreign god. Gadotsi thought it was a joke. Because I protected the Uruk, the humans of the Uruk and even Mesopotamia classified me as a Sumer god. Even so, the disappearance of the gods will not have much impact on me. When Wuming's power was insufficient in the past, he was restricted when he used his real body in the modern era. He had to be careful. However, now, Wuming did not have to be careful at all. This was because Wuming's status had reached the limit of the world. The world could no longer restrict Wuming. After all, Wuming was one step away from adulthood. However, this step could no longer rely on the accumulation of time. He had to find another way. Will Tachika hate me because I am a foreign god? Wuming suddenly turned around and looked at Gadotsi. However, this immediately received a response from Gudazi. How is that possible? Assassin is assassin. Is she a god or a human? Or does she have anything to do with a foreign god or a local god? Anyway, I've always liked assassin. Gadotsi had a baffled look on his face. However, Gadotsi's words stunned the innocent Matthew. His face couldn't help but blush. That. Senior, are you confessing to Senior Vilo? Matthew asked embarrassedly. Wuming was also stunned. He felt that Gadotsi's love for him was not the kind of love between a man and a woman. It was more like the love between a brother and a sister. It's not a confession. If I have to say it, I feel that Assassin is like a brother to me. Simply put, it's the love between a brother and a sister. Gadotsi also explained in a serious tone. Sure enough, Tachika, you think so too. Wuming sighed in relief. If he treated Gadotsi as a sister, and Gadotsi treated him as a love interest, wouldn't it be strange? Of course. Anyway, I don't know why, but I always feel close to Assassin. This was the same for Wuming. Although the two had only met a few times, ever since Wuming met Gadotsi for the first time, he felt that Gadotsi was like a sister to him. He wanted to take care of her. Although Wuming didn't understand the reason, it didn't hinder the feelings between Wuming and Gadotsi. Gadotsi said with a smile. Then, she threw herself into Wuming's arms. The space in this passage isn't that big. Why are you making a fuss? Can't you be more obedient? Wuming's face was full of helplessness. Gadotsi responded to Wuming with a proud laugh. Hee, I won't. Seeing this scene, Matthew said with a blank face. Doctor, I'm a bit confused. As a follower and junior who accompanied Gadotsi all the way, Matthew could be said to be the one who understood Gadotsi the most. Senior Varen and Senior Varen aren't siblings, and their feelings for each other are beyond the brotherly love I've seen, but the way they look at each other doesn't seem to be the love between a man and a woman. I don't quite understand this kind of feeling. However, the doctor didn't respond. Doctor. Chaldea had to speak through Gadotzi's bracelet, but Chaldea didn't need to be close to receive the sound. It was precisely because of this that Gadotzi also realized that something was wrong. After leaving Wu Ming's arms, Gadotzi called Chaldea. Doctor. Doctor. However, there was still no response. Is the signal interfered again? Gadotzi couldn't help but guess. After all, the signal between the bracelet and Chaldea was often easily interfered with. This was also a drawback that Chaldea couldn't eliminate. It shouldn't be. Although my cave does have a barrier, it can't be interfered with before I get close. Wu Ming also made a judgment. However, at this moment, Gadotzi's bracelet finally made a sound, but it was Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Yes, yes, this is your genius Leonardo da Vinci's bracelet. Student Romani has died in battle, and he was muttering, it's more than brotherly love, but it's not love between a man and a woman. I don't understand such feelings. Damn it, I'm such a loser without family, friends, and lovers. Oh, by the way, Romani was crying. As a genius, Leonardo da Vinci could imitate him, but for the sake of this genius image, I refused. So the doctor is such a loser. Gadotzi couldn't help but laugh dryly. Ah. I thought the doctor was married. Matthew, who had seen Roman wearing a ring, didn't know what to say. Roman, I won't talk about you for now, but Tachika, Matthew, Leonardo da Vinci, and the other surviving members of Chaldea, aren't they all your friends and family? You've been through life and death together, and you've been working hard to save the world. This is a situation where one wrong move will cause you to lose the whole game. Isn't that enough to prove this relationship? Although the saying, a friend in need is a friend indeed, seemed a little cliché, the meaning it expressed was not a cliché. No matter when, a friend in need could indeed reveal a friend in need, and Chaldea was currently doing so. After Wu Ming said this, Gadotzi, Matthew, and the rest of Chaldea fell into silence. Chapter 937. What's wrong? Wu Ming saw that everyone was silent, and for a moment, he was puzzled. Did he say something wrong? Vilo-senpai, you're right. Matthew showed a relieved smile. That's right, everyone worked together to get through so many singularities. Without everyone, Matthew and I definitely wouldn't be able to do it, Gadotzi also said. It seems that even a genius like me can be slow. It seemed that Wu Ming was better than Leonardo da Vinci in some aspect, and Leonardo da Vinci's voice sounded quite distressed. And Chaldea's staff also started to discuss because of this sentence. Yes, because I've been nervous all this time, I've forgotten that we're partners who have gone through so many difficulties together. Indeed, although we're facing a world crisis, the relationship between everyone has become more intimate. That's right, to be able to go through the end of the world with everyone, whether we succeed or not, we've already become friends. What nonsense are you talking about? We'll definitely succeed. That's right, Fujimaru and Gillett have gone through so many singularities, we'll definitely succeed. But we can't slack off, only by doing our job can we be worthy of Fujimaru and Gillett's efforts. Oh. Everyone exchanged words one after another, and although they were chatting happily, the staff still didn't forget their work at hand, and even their morale rose for some reason. For a time, Chaldea's control room was still operating normally, but no matter how one looked at it, it was livelier, more lively, and more hopeful than before. And Roman, who was squatting and crying on the side, also recovered and walked to Leonardo da Vinci's side. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci also took the initiative to let Roman sit down. After adjusting his mentality, Roman spoke. Oh, I can only say that you're worthy of being a historical hero and Lord God, you're more open-minded than us humans. Because of the impact of the burning of humanity, our nerves are indeed a little tense, in the end. Roman let out a long sigh and thanked Wuming sincerely. Thank you. Whether it was Leonardo da Vinci, Gadazzi, or Matthew, all of them could tell that Roman was very grateful to Wuming. Although it's not as serious as you make it out to be, you guys have indeed neglected it. Of course, Roman, if I had met you earlier, I think we would have definitely become friends. If that was the case, it would be hard to say if the current Roman would really have a fever. Whether or not Wuming could change the past Roman was another matter altogether. I think, you can probably change me. For some reason, Roman seemed to be recalling something and fell into deep thought. Forget it, let's talk about these things later. We have to hurry up and catch up with Gil. Don't let him wait too long. Even if he's not called a wise king, the king's temper is also erratic. Wuming's words surprised Gadazzi and Matthew. That's true. Matthew nodded. Yes, let's go quickly, I don't want to experience any more tests. It seems that Gadazzi's memory of the trial given by Gilgamesh was still fresh in her mind. Even if Gadazzi's view of the current Gilgamesh had changed, there was still a fear of Gilgamesh in her heart. Sure enough, when Gadazzi, Wuming, and Matthew caught up with Gilgamesh, Gadazzi's throat moved, and a nervous look appeared on her face. Gilgamesh, who was standing steadily in the middle of the passage with his back facing Wuming's trio, crossed his arms in front of his chest, and only spoke when he heard the movements of Wuming's trio. Idiot. Too slow. This king is still waiting for you. I'm sorry, King Gilgamesh. Gadazzi and Matthew were obviously frightened, but Wuming seemed to have seen through something, and a teasing smile appeared on his face. Ahem. Gil, if I remember correctly, there should be a fork in the road ahead. Although it was a very normal sentence, Wuming's tone gave people the feeling that he was teasing Gilgamesh. However, the response to Wuming was Gilgamesh's arrogant voice. Humph. You don't have to deliberately provoke this king. Even if this king will work himself to death, he will not be senile. It's just that our destination this time is not the cave where you are hiding, but another place. This king is afraid that you will take Fumaru and the others the wrong way, so he specially waited for you here. Yes, this road was not a one-way road, there would be many forks in the road ahead. The extra roads were deliberately made by Wuming. In short, in order to make the right way to the cave where he was hiding not easily discovered, it was specially made under the Divine Tower, but it was useless. How could people who had the ability to find the stone door and come in be confused by these forks? If they could come in, if they were instructed by Wuming, they would naturally not go the wrong way, and if they came in with their own ability, it meant that the other party was a capable person, and naturally, they would not go the wrong way. Not to mention those who couldn't come in, these forks had no effect on them since they couldn't even come in. As for those who came in by mistake, no one would come in by mistake. Wuming would not make such a typical mistake. The stone door itself was set by Wuming to disperse the loon. Ordinary people couldn't even get close to it, let alone open the mechanism to enter the passage by chance. Therefore, these forks became superfluous. When these forks were made, the young Gilgamesh also persuaded Wuming not to do these useless things, but according to Wuming's words, there must be forks in the tunnel, and other people's secret passages are like this. In the end, Gilgamesh couldn't resist Wuming, so he let Wuming complete the passage mixed with forks. As a result, this place was like a maze. Regardless of whether he got lost or not, he was definitely annoyed. Wuming didn't expect Gilgamesh to forget the way. After all, Gilgamesh must have been here in the past 3 months. Just like Gilgamesh said, he wouldn't forget the way even if he worked himself to death. Wuming teased Gilgamesh mainly to liven up the atmosphere so that Gadazzi and Matthew wouldn't be so nervous. After this king's Uruk was attacked by the magical beasts last time, this king accidentally discovered an extra passage that you set up underground. So, this king took advantage of the situation and dug a new space at the end of this passage to meet the requirements of this king's military advisor. Chapter 938. Gilgamesh said as he walked. Gilgamesh walked in front, illuminated by the light emitted by the dragon horn headdress on Wuming's head. His long shadow spread out on the special stone floor in front of him, creating a clear shadow. In fact, Gilgamesh could see clearly in the dark passage even if there was no light, and so could Wuming, so there was no light in this passage. Today, because Gadotsi and Matthew followed, Wuming asked Kalas to light up the passage. He had to say that Kalas was really omnipotent in terms of support. Wuming didn't know whether Matthew could see clearly, but Wuming knew that Gadotsi, as an ordinary person, needed light. Without delay, Wuming followed Gilgamesh, and then asked Gilgamesh. Speaking of which, your military counselor is a pseudo-follower. Is his personality Zhuge Kong Ming, or the physical personality? Or is it like Ishtar's 3:7? Taking this opportunity, he could ask Gilgamesh the truth, and Gadotsi and Matthew were also quite interested in this. Oh, it seems that you have seen this king's military counselor before. We met him in Winterwood in Rome, but at that time, one was Zhuge Kong Ming, and the other was the physical personality Ermero too. Without Wuming, Gadotsi and Matthew met Ermero too, who acted as a king's military counselor, when they followed the fifth emperor of Rome, Nero, to fight against the enemy. This king's military counselor is Zhuge Kong Ming, not the physical personality Ermero too you have seen. After Gilgamesh finished answering, Wuming spoke again. So what does this Zhuge Kong Ming need? Is it an independent secret space? Then the cave I used to hide in is not impossible, why spend the effort to build another one? Wuming was quite puzzled. He needs an enclosed space where no one can disturb him to make his props, and your cave has a ventilation, so this king created such a space for him. Probably because he died in a tent with airflow when he was alive, Zhuge Kong Ming, who became a heroic spirit, was quite concerned about the enclosed space without airflow, especially the kind of enclosed space underground, which made Zhuge Kong Ming quite satisfied. Furthermore, the cave you once hid in belongs to you. This king will forever guard it for you. This king will not allow anyone to use it. This point is off the table. On this point, Gilgamesh still has his own insistence. Wuming naturally knew what Gilgamesh cared about. For Gilgamesh, the place where Wuming lived probably has a special meaning to Gilgamesh. Speaking of which, what's at the end of this path? It's just a dead end, there's nothing. Because of this, Gilgamesh built a new secret room at the end of this path. Is your memory getting bad because of your age? How can you forget something you did? Gilgamesh couldn't help but criticize Wuming. There's nothing I can do about it. I was just playing with it back then. Wuming turned his head to the side awkwardly. Speaking of which, what's at the end of the other paths? Are they also dead ends? Gadotsi was suddenly curious. They're all dead ends. Gilgamesh very simply and crudely replied. Indeed, Gil is right, they're all dead ends. However, Wuming added in his heart as if he was complaining. It was indeed a dead end. Other than the dead ends of the other paths, there were all kinds of runes, such as cursed flames, thunderbolts, and so on. Furthermore, they were all so dangerous that one would die if they were not careful. Basically, it was the kind of dead end that made it impossible to survive. Looking at Gadotsi's sudden realization, Wuming was sure that the dead end imagined by Gadotsi and the dead end mentioned by Gilgamesh were definitely not the same thing. Castor needs a magic workshop to make items. Mr. Kongming probably needs to build his own workshop, so he asked King Gilgamesh to help him build it. Matthew suddenly interjected. Exactly. Gilgamesh praised Matthew, which made Matthew a little proud. However, Wu-Ming was not like Matthew, who didn't know anything. Although caster needs a magic workshop, the magic cast by Chinese heroes should be fundamentally different from the magic cast by other regions. Even if there is no workshop, Chinese servants can still exert their power. Although Wu-Ming didn't know the meaning, Wu-Ming knew that the Chinese caster was not like the magicians in other regions. Not only the method and name were different, but the essence was also different from the magic base used by other magicians. In other words, Chinese magicians didn't use magic base. Not to mention the Kanagi magicians. For the time being, the magicians after the Kanagi magicians needed magic base to use magic. Although it seemed that magicians could easily perform magic by chanting a spell or drawing a circle, but magicians could only perform magic by connecting to the magic base of this world. The magic base could be imagined as a collection of a series of knowledge, ideas, and so on, and it basically existed in the land. Of course, if you think about Christianity, a world-famous religion, its magic base might be spread all over the world. Just like the Lune Rune, there was also a magic base when it was used. When Wu-Ming learned the Lune Rune, he was a Kanagi, and Wu-Ming was a mutant, so the magic base naturally couldn't restrict him, so Wu-Ming only knew a little about it and didn't go too deep. The magic circuit was not only used to provide magical power, but it was also used to connect to the magic base. This was the most basic truth in the magic world, and basically, every magician would know it. However, Wu-Ming, who glanced at Gadotsi, silently took back his sentence at this moment. He had to say that Gadotsi was really too bad as a magician, and in terms of temperament, Gadotsi was not suitable to be a magician at all. However, it was exactly because of Gadotsi's temperament that he could keep making connections with the clones of the heroic spirits who had unique personalities and unusual tempers, the servants. In short, although Wu-Ming didn't have a deep understanding of these, Wu-Ming knew that the magic used by the Chinese magicians was very different from the magic used in other places, so Wu-Ming pointed out that Zhuge Kongming didn't need a magic workshop. Moreover, as the military advisor on the battlefield, Zhuge Kongming must have spent most of his time marching and fighting. Since that's the case, it's not surprising that he has a way to replace the workshop. Now that the magical beasts are wreaking havoc, I don't think that the military advisor needs a special workshop to make items. Wu-Ming's eyes flashed with the light of speculation, although he looked at Gilgamesh. I'm afraid, Gil, you gave him some task. Chapter 939. What task was given? Looking at each other, Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but repeat. As expected of this king's teacher, Uruk Hyunryong, that's right. As you said, this king's military counselor doesn't need a special workshop. The reason why the military counselor needs a workshop is indeed because this king gave Zhuge Kongming a difficult task. Gilgamesh stopped abruptly as he finished speaking. We're here. Ha! So fast. Matthew showed a look of disbelief. They just walked for a short while, how did they arrive? With such a short distance, if they were on the ground, it was almost the market near the Holy Tower in Uruk City. No, Matthew, since you stepped into this fork, your speed has increased several times, but you didn't notice it. Roman saw it clearly through the instrument in Chaldea. The figures of Gadotsi and the others seemed to be moving forward at a high speed. It can be said that they were completely out of Uruk City. According to the instrument, your current position is somewhere near the north wall. Roman shouted in disbelief. How is that possible? We only walked a few steps. Gadotsi was also surprised. Is the instrument broken? What's going on? So annoying. Roman checked the instrument. But, King Gilgamesh also said that we have arrived, maybe we are really near the north wall. Matthew raised his small hand and expressed his opinion. So that's how it is. Roman stopped checking the equipment and nodded. I think it's probably some kind of magic trick with special effects set up in this underground passage. Since this was Kanzaki's underground labyrinth-like tunnel, the entire tunnel was filled with mana. That was why Roman didn't pay much attention to this mana. Now that he thought about it, it was highly likely that the mana was being emitted by some sort of special magic spell. At the very least, it was related. Roman's judgment is correct, this passage has an acceleration effect. Wuming gave the final answer. However, this was not set by Wuming, it was probably added by Gilgamesh later. Of course, don't forget that this king is now a magician. It's natural for him to use magic to make the passage more convenient. This place was quite a distance away from Uruk. If they were to rely on walking, they would not be able to reach their destination in a short period of time. Only by applying the acceleration effect to the entire passage could they reach their destination in such a short period of time. It only takes such a short time to go from Uruk to the North Wall. This is a great advantage for the North Wall. Matthew realized the problem. In a sense, this passage shortened the distance between the North Wall and Uruk to the extreme. In this way, whether it was support, marching, retreating, or other things, it could be done easily. This passage originally led to the north, and its end was near the North Wall. In the beginning, when Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, one of the commanders of the demonic beasts, led the demonic beasts to sneak into the Uruk from underground, they also found this passage by accident and smoothly arrived near the Uruk. If not for this, the demonic beasts wouldn't have reached the Uruk that night. However, there were two sides to everything. Since the demonic beasts could use this passage to reach the Uruk, why couldn't humans use it? Gilgamesh simply transformed the end of the passage into Zhuge Kong Ming's magic workshop, which was connected to the barracks in the North Wall. If there were no limitations, it would indeed be more convenient to support the North Wall from Uruk. The limitation was the narrowness of the passage. Kalas, analyze it. Wuming put his hand on the wall and passed the magic to Kalas to achieve the effect of sampling. Master, the space here is too narrow. The magic attached to it can only work on a dozen people at most. If more people are added, I'm afraid it will exceed the capacity of the acceleration magic and the acceleration will be scrapped. Kalas' cold voice came from Wuming's head. It could be said that it scared Gadotsi and Matthew. Senior Villow's horn. Matthew was stunned. Talk. Gadotsi raised her finger and pointed at Wuming's head in surprise. By the way, Kalas didn't talk to you, but you have seen Kalas before. Wuming's words made Gadotsi fall into deep thought. Have we seen her before? In addition to this peculiarity, Gadotsi couldn't remember when Wuming had a horn on his head. When we first met, the black hat I was wearing was actually another form of Kalas. After hearing Wuming's words, Gadotsi suddenly recalled the first time she and Wuming met. That memory was still fresh in Gadotsi's mind. So it's that black hat? Gadotsi suddenly shouted, as if she had just woken up from a dream. Senpai, you are too rude. Mashu was a little embarrassed as she poked Gadotsi. Gadotsi, who realized that she was indeed a little rude, scratched the back of her head. Hey! I'm sorry. However, Kalas didn't pay attention to Gadotsi and Matthew at all. It was precisely because Kalas didn't talk to anyone other than Wuming that Gadotsi and Matthew didn't remember Kalas. Oh, it turned out to be a high-level magic costume. When did you get this? This king doesn't have any impression of it. Gilgamesh saw the nature of Kalas at a glance. When he saw the dragon horn on Wuming's head, Gilgamesh knew that it was a magic costume, but Gilgamesh didn't expect Wuming's magic costume to be so intelligent. It was definitely a high-level magic costume. Kalas was made by the second magician in the future. Although it is a simple auxiliary magic costume, Kalas is almost omnipotent except for combat. What? The second magician made it. This time it was Roman's turn to be surprised. Sure enough, Roman should have thought of this earlier. An attire that was similar to an artificial intelligence and could instantly analyze the magic within the passage was undoubtedly the highest level of magic attire. Perhaps only an existence at the level of a mage would be able to create something like this. However, before Roman could recover from his shock, a voice that was supposed to be very pleasant to the ear emitted a strong fighting spirit at this moment. "Oh, I seem to have heard someone mention omnipotence." Chapter 940. It's Leonardo da Vinci's voice. However, Matthew's words were full of worry. After all, although Leonardo da Vinci's voice was still pleasant to the ears, when Leonardo da Vinci's voice entered Matthew's ears, Matthew had a bad feeling. It's probably Leonardo da Vinci's jealousy again. It's not the first time. Godazzi whispered to Matthew. After spending so many days together from Winterwood to Mesopotamia, Godazzi understood Leonardo da Vinci. Whenever other people involved Leonardo da Vinci's expertise, Leonardo da Vinci would become unusually unique. For example, Wu Ming's omnipotence just now. For Leonardo da Vinci, who had the title of omnipotent, this could be said to be a blatant provocation, and it was a top-notch provocation. Leonardo da Vinci was talented in painting, music, sculpting, mathematics, astronomy, geometry, biology, physics, engineering, invention of props, creation of weapons, and many other fields. Furthermore, he had outstanding achievements in all of them. Furthermore, such an omnipotent person had quite a bit of talent in magic as well. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of counterfeiting, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real product. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of art, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real artist. If someone provoked Leonardo da Vinci in the aspect of invention and construction, then Leonardo da Vinci would discuss with the other party on who is the real inventor. Although it seemed like he was going to use violence, Leonardo da Vinci was against violence. However, if he accidentally used violence, Leonardo da Vinci would not reflect on it. Wu Ming's words just now included all these aspects, which could be said to be an unprecedented provocation for Leonardo da Vinci. Omnipotence. This word could be said to be synonymous with Leonardo da Vinci. Not only Leonardo da Vinci himself, but also many scholars, and followers who knew Leonardo da Vinci in history recognized him. The personnel of Chaldea often sighed with emotion about Leonardo da Vinci's omnipotence. Saying that other existences were omnipotent in front of such a person, wasn't that a provocation to Leonardo da Vinci? Although Wu Ming didn't mean it, the speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. It could only be said that this really confirmed Leonardo da Vinci's words. Be careful of artist followers, because artist followers were often some lunatics. Leonardo da Vinci. Calm down, please. The magic you emit has already affected the safety of the individual of our opposing incense, has been completely detected. Communication is also interfered with. Please restrain yourself. Indeed, Wu Ming's side did start to become noisy when he heard Chaldea's words. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss seems to be serious. It's over. I hope the doctor can stop Leonardo da Vinci from kissing. Matthew and Godazzi began to pray meaninglessly. Wu Ming couldn't help but feel nervous at this moment. It was reasonable to say that he didn't have to be afraid of Leonardo da Vinci at all, but strangely, at this moment, Wu Ming didn't know why he felt a trace of fear. This was probably the uniqueness of artist followers, to be able to make Wu Ming feel afraid. However, in the next second, the sound of something breaking suddenly came from Godazzi's bracelet. Beep! That was the sound of the communication being cut off. The communication was cut off. Godazzi and Matthew were curious. It shouldn't be that weak, right? Could it be that Roman did something? However, Wu Ming looked at Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's claw-gloved hand was still pointing at Godazzi's direction. There was a trace of magic on the tip of the claw glove's index finger. Apparently, Gilgamesh helped to cut off the communication between Chaldea and this side. This king just felt that the genius over at Chaldea's side is a little too noisy, and we are about to enter another magician's workshop. If the other party asks, just use this as an excuse. Most magicians' workshops did have the function of blocking other magic methods. This made Gadotzi and Matthew, who knew Leonardo da Vinci, brighten up when they heard Gilgamesh's words. As expected of King Gilgamesh, who can deal with so many desperate government affairs. Gadotzi thought of Gilgamesh's efficiency in dealing with government affairs not long ago. No matter what, he could easily get things done. As expected of King Gilgamesh. He actually found a solution so easily. Matthew looked at Gilgamesh with admiration. As long as Leonardo da Vinci calmed down and explained the reason with a proper reason, this matter would basically be over. A calm Leonardo da Vinci was a very reliable and approachable follower. You too, praise this king to your heart's content, ha ha ha, probably satisfied that he solved the upcoming disaster. In an instant, Gilgamesh laughed heartily. Yes, King Gilgamesh. As if encouraged, Gadotzi and Matthew let out an amazing shout. Then Wuming made a little joke. Hyunryong, this king solved this problem for you. You should thank this king. Gilgamesh looked at Wuming happily. However, how could Wuming let Gilgamesh succeed? This is underground, I don't dare to shout. What if it collapses? This scared Gadotzi and Matthew, and they immediately shut their mouths. However, Gilgamesh still had a way to crack Wuming's trick. Humph. This place has been magically processed. How can it collapse because of a mere shout? It's simply an alarmist. Immediately afterward, Gilgamesh looked at Wuming, or rather, he glared at Wuming. What's more, this is a shout of praise for this king, how can it stop? Stupid. As if he was dissatisfied with Wuming for causing Gadotzi and Matthew's voices to disappear, he burst out swearing. Yes, my king, but shouldn't we get down to business? Wuming smiled helplessly at Gilgamesh. What are they here for? Your remonstrance is reasonable. This king won't fuss over your mistake. Let's go. This strategist's workshop is just a turn ahead. Gilgamesh said as he led the way. Really? Wuming shook his head helplessly, then followed Gilgamesh. At this moment, Wuming missed the past. Chapter 941. In the past, Gilgamesh often quarreled with Wuming like this. However, every time Enkidu acted as the middleman, Gilgamesh and Wuming would be fine in an instant. From an outsider's point of view, they might think that Wuming and Gilgamesh were quarreling. However, the two of them only looked fierce on the surface. In fact, they didn't seem to be quarreling at all. After growing up, Gilgamesh would call everyone bastard whenever he saw them. Although he wouldn't call Enkidu and Wuming that way, sometimes Gilgamesh's temper was so bad that even Wuming couldn't bear it. Enkidu would definitely persuade Gilgamesh with reason and emotion, in a gentle manner, but Wuming would definitely not be so gentle. As a result, there was the seemingly quarrelsome conversation just now. Over time, it became a way of saying things between the two of them. It could also be considered as a way to vent their feelings. Therefore, from the outside, Wuming and Gilgamesh, who seemed to be quarreling, were actually just having a normal conversation. Gilgamesh was clearly not angry. He was just indulging his feelings in front of his friends, family, and teacher, which led to the appearance of quarreling. Losing his temper to outsiders was out of anger, but losing his temper to his family was simply because the other party was his family. Moreover, it wasn't called losing his temper. In short, there was no need to have any concerns because to Gilgamesh, Wuming was his family. Although as a king, he didn't need to care about other people's feelings and could do whatever he wanted as a tyrant. There was even less of a need to hide it when facing his family. Especially after sitting on the throne of the Sage King and becoming the true king of people, Gilgamesh hadn't experienced something like this for a long time. After all, compared to himself when he was young, as the Sage King, Gilgamesh's words would not be refuted at all, because the Sage King's words were very correct. Compared to when Gilgamesh was young, there were still a few arrogant guys who kept remonstrating him. Now, in the Uruk imperial court, there were no unnecessary voices. After all, the Sage King's words were right. Naturally, no one would ask for a rebuke. However, no matter what time it was, Gilgamesh always lacked a family member who could bicker with him, a family member who could objectively communicate with him regardless of whether he was right or wrong. Enkidu's personality was too gentle, so it was impossible. Only Wuming could fulfill this role. He was not only Gilgamesh's teacher, but also an existence similar to his adoptive father. Moreover, his thinking was quite avant-garde. More importantly, Gilgamesh couldn't defeat or subdue him. Gilgamesh couldn't fight with Wuming by risking his life and perishing together. Over time, this became the way Wuming and Gilgamesh talked to each other. Unfortunately, they still had business to attend to at the moment. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have minded talking to Gilgamesh for a while. Anyway, Enkidu was in the form of part of Wuming's spiritual base, and when Enkidu appeared, Gilgamesh would definitely be shocked to the extent that his face would change color. At the thought of this, Wuming's face showed a wicked smile. However, Wuming also thought of one of the demonic beast's commanders, the person who pretended to be Enkidu. This was also a world that he had to deal with personally. However, it was better to deal with the matter at hand first. When everyone turned the corner, they saw a door with a special formation engraved on it. The door completely blocked the road in front of them without any gaps. It looked like it grew naturally here. When Wuming saw this stone door, he felt an unknown magic power enveloping him. "Senior, do you feel it?" Matthew and Gadotsi whispered. "Yes, I feel it." Gadotsi nodded. "We've probably entered the range of the other party's noble artifact." Wuming wanted to take a step forward, facing the magic power emitted by the door in front of him, and walked to the front of the door. It was a circle formed by two large black and white fish intertwined with each other. There were 8 patterns that were very similar but had obvious differences in details. This was the formation engraved on the door. 8 trigrams, this is probably Zhuge Kong Ming's best formation, Stone Soldier 8 formation. Back at the Winterwood Singularity, Zhuge Kong Ming wanted to use the Stone Soldier 8 formation on Attila the Hun in an attempt to delay the other party and give Gadotsi and the others a chance to escape. However, Zhuge Kong Ming's Stone Soldier 8 formation had just been used, and it was countered by Sima Yi's mixed elements array that was specially designed to deal with Zhuge Kong Ming. Wuming finally witnessed the power of the Stone Soldier 8 formation here today. Colossus. At Wuming's command, the glowing dragon horn on Wuming's head, which was Colossus, suddenly expanded the light, and then immediately weakened. The light released by Colossus was used for scanning, and the light that expanded just now was like radiation, instantly scanning the surrounding area with this place as the center. "Master, everything underground within the largest range that I can scan is covered by an invisible magic power. Due to the uniqueness of the other party's noble artifact, if you're not close to here, you won't be able to sense the existence of this special magic power at all. Probably due to the uniqueness of the other party's noble artifact, although the range of the magic power was extremely wide, if one was not close to the source, one would not be able to sense it at all. Moreover, the entire underground area that was beyond Colossus's scanning range was covered. This is Zhuge Kong Ming's countermeasure to prevent the Uruk from being attacked by monsters from underground again." Wuming looked at Gilgamesh as he spoke. However, Gilgamesh did not answer Wuming directly. This king was having a headache about how to prevent the next underground attack from monsters. This king's military advisor has done this king a huge favor. Since there was a first time, there would definitely be a second time. Gilgamesh would not expect monsters to be like humans, who would give up after failing the first time. The safety of the Uruk could not be taken lightly by gambling. Coincidentally, Zhuge Kong Ming's noble artifact could prevent the enemy from invading. It could be used as the underground defense that gave Gilgamesh a headache. However, there was a price to pay. In order to cover the entire underground area, the expanded range of the Stone Soldier 8 formation could only be used underground, and the parts above ground could not be taken care of at all. Even so, almost the entire underground area that extended from the north wall to the Uruk was locked by Zhuge Kong Ming's noble artifact. Once monsters sneaked into the range of the Stone Soldier 8 formation from underground, they would immediately lose their direction and eventually return to the starting point. It was impossible for them to dig deeper and sneak into the Uruk to attack, because if they were to dig deeper, they would dig into Ereshkigal's mansion of the dead. Chapter 942. After paying the price of causing many monsters to die in the underworld, the monster commanders gave up on the idea of attacking the Uruk from underground. They had no choice. When the monster commanders tried to dig deeper into the ground where the 8 stone formations could not cover, they would reach the underworld if they dug a little deeper. There was no way around it. Although Ereshkigal's return did not bring the underworld from the entire Mesopotamia region, and some places could still be dug very deep, the idea of digging from the bottom to bypass the 8 stone formations was really unrealistic. After all, it was too deep, and it would take a lot of time and effort. Therefore, avoiding the underworld and bypassing the 8 stone formations from underground was really difficult for the monsters. Therefore, the monster commanders no longer tried to bypass the Uruk from underground. Setting up Zhuge Kong Ming's workshop underground and letting Zhuge Kong Ming use the noble phantasm was actually a defensive measure set up by Gilgamesh for the underground. This was a blatant scheme. With the noble phantasm covering the underground, the monsters could only go around or give up on attacking the Uruk from underground. However, the efficiency of going around the Uruk was too low. It was better to attack the Uruk directly from the north. At the very least, they could wait for the monsters to increase in numbers and let them attack from all directions. No matter how hard it was more practical than going around the Uruk from underground. Therefore, the monster commanders changed their minds and prepared to attack the Uruk from all directions. Wu Ming's first encounter with Ulidim was the vanguard. He went around the mountains to the back of the Uruk and waited for the opportunity to attack the Quetzalcoatl together with the monsters from the north, the mountains in the northeast, and the Persian Gulf in the southeast to take down the Uruk from all directions. At the same time, they could also get rid of the Quetzalcoatl on the surface. At that time, they only needed to focus on the goddess of the underworld. Wu Ming felt that the monster commanders were a little whimsical, or perhaps they thought too simply of humans and the Quetzalcoatl. The power of the feathered god had been mentioned before. Furthermore, it took a lot of effort for magical beasts to traverse mountains. Only magical beast commanders with unique physiques and abilities superior to mass-produced magical beasts would be able to traverse mountains effortlessly. However, with the command of the demonic beast commander, it wasn't impossible to mass-produce demonic beasts. But if that was the case, the number of demonic beasts would need to be terrifyingly large. Otherwise, how could they attack from all directions? It could only be said that the idea was good, but it was unrealistic. After all, there weren't that many magical beasts. He could only wait. There was no other way. After all, magical beasts also needed to be born. But now, even if there were enough magical beasts, perhaps the magical beast commander's plan to attack the Uruk from all directions couldn't be carried out. After all, whether it was the mass-produced Ulidim, Ygir, or Musamafu, more than half of the demonic beasts had been killed or injured. It was also because of the huge decrease in the number of demonic beasts that the demonic beast commanders in charge of attacking the north wall had restrained themselves. The frequency of attacks and the number of demonic beasts had decreased, which was why Gilgamesh was able to find time to come here with Wuming, Gadotzi, and Matthew. And not only that, but the number of demonic beast commanders had also decreased from the original 7 to 5, the unknown person who had stolen Enkidu's body, the venomous dragon Basumu, the three-horned lion dragon Ygir, the seven-headed snake Musamafu, and the winged mermaid Kururu. One of the demonic beast commanders, Ulidim, wanted to devour Wuming in the southwest mountain, but was killed by Wuming instead. The other demonic beast commander, Ygir, was also killed by Ereshkigal. Although Musamafu escaped, it was really unpleasant. On the human side, the original 10 servants had been reduced to 11. Although Wuming had drawn Ishtar to his side, she was still the Sumer goddess, the mistress of the sky, Ishtar. Moreover, whether it was Wuming or Gilgamesh, what they valued was not Ishtar herself, but the bowl of the sky that Ishtar had, Gugurana. Although it was a mythological beast, Gugurana couldn't be defeated by the number of servants, but by the quality of the servants. The unknown person who had stolen Enkidu's body was let go. After all, the other party was using Enkidu's body, and it would be best to capture him alive. The remaining 4 demonic beast commanders didn't need to worry about anything, and the remaining 4 demonic beast commanders were not small. When the time came to deal with these 4 demonic beast commanders, if Ishtar summoned Gugurana and let some servants cooperate with it, eliminating these 4 demonic beast commanders would not be difficult at all. The only thing that needed to be paid attention to was Basumu's poison. Even Gugurana couldn't ignore Basumu's poison. Both sides were at the same level, but it was hard to guarantee that Gugurana would be poisoned. However, if it was Finbaba, there was probably a chance that it could resist Basumu's poison. As the mythological beast of the forest, Finbaba was equivalent to the incarnation of nature, and it had a purifying effect. Even if it couldn't completely purify Basumu's poison, it should be able to weaken the poison or resist it. When Wuming left last time, he did let Finbaba out of Yggdrasil and released it to this singularity. The purpose was to let Finbaba help to create a wall of vines to protect the north wall and protect humans. As a result, Wuming didn't know where Finbaba went. Its master had returned, but it didn't know how to find its master. By the way, Gilgamesh, do you know where Finbaba went? Wuming suddenly asked Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh frowned. Weren't they talking about the 8 trigrams? Why did they suddenly change the topic? It was impossible for Gilgamesh to know that Wuming was thinking about so many things, but Gilgamesh finally answered Wuming. I don't know. After you left, Finbaba helped the north wall construct a wall of vines, and then disappeared. Although the wall of vines in the north wall has basically been consumed, it is also thanks to Finbaba's help at that time. Otherwise, this king's Uruk wouldn't know what would have happened. Finbaba added a layer of vines before the north wall was completed. Following the vines, the efficiency was much higher. It could be said that without Finbaba's help, the 11 magical beast commanders and a large number of enhanced magical beasts that suddenly appeared 3 months ago would have been enough to break the north wall. I'll go look for it later. After all, Finbaba can also contribute to dealing with the magical beast commanders. However, Wuming's words attracted Roman's attention. Villo, is the Finbaba you're talking about the Finbaba that lives in the fir forest? Wuming wasn't surprised that Roman knew about Finbaba. After all, if he could be passed down as a god, there was no reason why Finbaba couldn't. That's right. What's wrong? If we can really find Finbaba, it can be said to be a great support for us. Chapter 943. According to Sumer's legends, Finbaba, the divine beast of the forest, had unparalleled power. It even imprisoned the mistress of the sky, Ishtar, leaving the gods helpless. In the end, it was Gilgamesh and Enkidu who worked together with some of the gods to subdue it. It was also because Gilgamesh saved Ishtar that he became involved with Ishtar, which led to the subsequent events of the Bowl of the Sky incident. Roman stopped there. After all, it was not appropriate for him to explain the subsequent events in front of Gilgamesh. All in all, if we can find Finbaba, it will definitely be as useful as the bowl of the sky, Gugalana. No, it should be said that Finbaba is indeed stronger than the bowl of the sky. Is this true, assassin? Is Finbaba really that strong? Gadotsi, who did not understand this, looked at Wuming, trying to get an answer. Probably. Wuming, who was deep in thought, casually replied. It seemed a little perfunctory. It could not be helped. Wuming's Finbaba was not the same as the Finbaba that Roman and the others understood from the legends. Wuming's actions in the parallel world were projected to other parallel worlds by the suppression force. In other parallel worlds, Wuming's legends and historical stories were modified. This was true, but it was limited to Wuming himself. Moreover, the parallel worlds could not completely copy Wuming's actions. There would definitely be changes. For example, the Gilgamesh in the parallel world that Wuming was in was a woman, but the Gilgamesh in this parallel world was a man. In this way, there would definitely be differences between the two sides. Wuming originally thought that the Finbaba in the parallel world would be modified like Wuming's Finbaba. However, when Wuming heard what Roman said, he instantly understood one thing. The Finbaba in this world and his Finbaba experienced different things. According to Roman, Finbaba imprisoned Ishtar. Then, Gilgamesh and Enkidu were asked by the gods to rescue Ishtar, which led to the Bowl of the Sky incident. However, Wuming's Finbaba did not imprison Ishtar. Moreover, because Finbaba and Wuming's holy lance Yggdrasil fused, after being retrieved by Wuming, Finbaba basically did not appear in Mesopotamia. The Bowl of the Sky incident in Wuming's parallel world was only because Ishtar lost her temper because she thought that she was fooled. Sure enough, Wuming was still relying on Ishtar to descend, anyway, because the Finbaba was retrieved by Wuming. Wuming did not know the specific strength of Finbaba. Therefore, Wuming hesitated when answering Gadotsi. In the end, Wuming, who did not think that it would affect anything, chose to end the topic. I'll look for Finbaba later. For now, let's deal with the matter at hand. It was better to wait until they found Finbaba in the future. By the way, how do we get in? Wuming looked at Gilgamesh. This door should not be opened with brute force. There should be some kind of mechanism. Logically speaking, this door should have opened when we stood here. Since it didn't open, it's probably because Zhuge Kongming is busy inside. Gilgamesh was not anxious because Zhuge Kongming neglected him because Gilgamesh knew that Zhuge Kongming's task was difficult. At this moment, as if it had heard Gilgamesh's words, the door in front of everyone split from the middle and slowly opened to both sides, revealing darkness. This was probably the so-called camouflage. King Gilgamesh, please forgive me. A familiar voice came from the darkness, followed by the figure of a young man who seemed to be in his 30s coming out of the darkness. The young man's face was the face of Ermero II that Wuming had seen before. Zhuge Kongming did indeed use Ermero II's pseudo-follower. Sure enough, it's Ermero II's pseudo-follower. Gadotsi and Matthew whispered to each other. Yes, Senpai, I just don't know who is inside this body. Judging from the other party's first sentence just now, it should be Zhuge Kongming without a doubt. Wuming also joined the small circle of the two and whispered to each other. If it was Ermero II, it was impossible to talk to Gilgamesh with words like, please forgive me. After all, Ermero II was a modern man, so it should be Zhuge Kongming who was from the ancient era. It's okay, how is the task given to you by this king? I'm doing the final processing, so I neglected you. Please come in and talk. Zhuge Kongming turned sideways and motioned everyone to go in and talk. Gilgamesh took the lead and went in, followed by Wuming. When it was Gadotsi and Matthew's turn, Matthew stopped and asked about Zhuge Kongming. Mr. Kongming, do you remember us? Zhuge Kongming shook his head. I don't remember anymore. It seems that you probably met another me somewhere else. Matthew's expression was a little bad, but Matthew wasn't disappointed with the answer. After all, it couldn't be helped. After all, servants were the avatars of heroic spirits. Along the way, they had met many servants that they had met before. However, some of them knew them, and some of them didn't. The most typical example was Leonidas I, who was currently in the North Wall. When they were in the Roman singularity, they encountered Leonidas I as an enemy. However, Leonidas I in the Mesopotamia singularity didn't seem to remember Gadotsi and Matthew. In short, Gadotsi and Matthew were used to it. Let's go in and talk. When the door of the stone formation is open, my noble phantasm will be temporarily ineffective. Although the demonic beasts wouldn't choose to attack from underground, they still had to open the stone formation. What if the demonic beasts used the same trick again? When Matthew and Gadotsi heard this, they both showed a panicked expression, as if they were embarrassed for delaying things. Sorry. Let's go in. After Gadotsi smiled awkwardly, she immediately pulled Matthew, who was also smiling awkwardly, and ran into the dark fog. In this regard, Zhuge Kongming smiled rather indifferently. Although the noble phantasm would indeed be ineffective for a while, there was no need to panic. Shaking his head, Zhuge Kongming then walked into the door, and in the next second, the originally split 8 trigrams slowly closed together. Chapter 944. Zhuge Kongming's workshop wasn't as big as imagined, but upon closer inspection, it wasn't small at all. However, Zhuge Kongming's semicircular workshop was quite attractive. The semicircular magic workshop gave people the feeling that the sky was like a bamboo hat, and the ground was like a plate. It was filled with the aura of ancient China, as if they had come from Mesopotamia to ancient China in an instant. The entire workshop's floor was covered with neat green stones, and the domed ceiling was also decorated. There wasn't a trace of soil in sight. It was simply a neat stone room, and it made people's eyes light up. Zhuge Kongming's workshop didn't have much in it, except for a few huge stones and a stone platform in the middle. The huge stones were arranged in a circular pattern in the middle. Upon closer inspection, there were exactly 8 of them, and they were arranged in the shape of the 8 trigrams. In the middle, there was a platform in black and white. On the platform was a strange machine that looked like a modern cannon-shaped weapon, but it was much larger than modern military cannons. The maximum length of the machine was at least 20 meters. Most importantly, this strange machine was so gorgeous that it didn't look like a weapon at all. It looked more like a precious treasure that had been lost to the world. What is this? Gadotsi was shocked. Could this thing that looked like a cannon be some kind of important device? A weapon? Or is this a necessity for Mr. Kongming's workshop? Matthew asked. It was obvious that Gadotsi and Matthew were really interested in this. Taking a closer look at the cannon, the body of the cannon was just a support that could move the barrel up and down. The support supported a long, cannon-like object. The entire cannon barrel could be said to occupy 90% of the entire machine. The current inclination of the barrel was 20 degrees, and it was almost level with the ground. The support under the barrel could be used to adjust the angle of the barrel. Although the support couldn't make the barrel tilt 90 degrees, 67 degrees was not a problem. If it was a weapon, it could be used as a super long-range weapon. At the end of the barrel, there was a round cover that could be opened. The entire barrel gradually became thinner from the back to the front. At the muzzle, there was not a pitch-black hole, but a sharp spike. The spike was as long as 3 meters. It looked like a long spear, and it was quite slender, which made it extremely terrifying. However, when matched with the barrel that was over 20 meters long, the 3-meter muzzle was actually nothing. It was just that the 3-meter long muzzle was quite terrifying. If it was shorter, it would probably look like the tip of a ballpoint pen or an electric soldering iron. However, no matter how long it was hard to believe that this machine was a long-range weapon. Other things aside, the spikes at the muzzle looked like they were used to stab or ram, but it would be too strange to call it a battering ram. But unfortunately, it was indeed a weapon. Dr. Godotzi and Matthew asked Roman, who was in charge of Chaldea and had the knowledge of the database. Ahem, this. Roman's answer was stuttering, and it was obvious that he didn't know. This is the seal of divinity, Dinger, Wooming answered Godotzi and Matthew on behalf of Roman. Dinger. Godotzi and Matthew nodded thoughtfully. However, Godotzi asked his question in a serious manner. By the way, assassin, what is the seal of divinity, Dinger? This time, Gilgamesh answered Godotzi before Wooming could. It's a weapon used to launch this king's treasure, using the instantaneous magic power as a cannonball. Treasure. Matthew and Godotzi were a little confused. Could it be that just gold and silver could be used as a cannonball? Would it be weak? The two of them were full of doubts as they had never seen a cannonball being launched. However, it was indeed so. After all, the treasure of this era seemed a little difficult for Godotzi and Matthew to understand. At that moment, Wooming simply explained to the two of them. To put it simply, it's actually a treasure that can be called a noble phantasm. It's loaded and launched as a cannonball. Noble phantasm. The reason why Wooming said so was because it was easy to understand a noble phantasm. When Wooming said so, Godotzi and Matthew instantly understood. Both of their eyes were full of disbelief. Did it have to be so extravagant? Not only Godotzi and Matthew, but Roman was also shocked. Noble phantasm. Is this the so-called collapse of fantasy? It's such a waste. Roman sighed helplessly from Godotzi's bracelet. Noble phantasm was the crystallization of humans' fantasy. It was not a problem to call it the collapse of fantasy. After hearing what Roman said, Godotzi and Matthew agreed with Roman, which was rare. I see. It's indeed a very appropriate description. Matthew nodded in agreement. It's rare for the doctor to say something that's right. Roman was a little sad about what Godotzi said. However, he had been through a lot and gradually got used to it. Using a noble phantasm as a cannonball and launching it to cause an explosion. Theoretically, it could cause a lot of damage, but is it really okay to be so wasteful? Roman was once again worried about Gilgamesh's reckless waste. Human history is a waste of history. If that's the case, this king's phantasm should be used this way. Gilgamesh's courage let Godotzi and Mashu once again witness Gilgamesh's excellent side. He's indeed the most ancient hero king. Matthew once again praised Gilgamesh in a serious manner. If it were me, I would probably be very reluctant. Godotzi smiled embarrassedly. Isn't that obvious? The only one who can easily do this is this king, who has all the treasures in this world. Ha ha ha. Gilgamesh laughed happily. This made Wooming shake his head helplessly again. The king would not hesitate to accept the compliments and be happy because it was an affirmation of the king. King Gilgamesh, it's time for you to explain the mission that you've given to Zhuge Kongming. Although that was what Wooming said, Wooming could almost guess it. After all, the divine right seal, Dinger, on the stone platform in front of them was obviously different from the one that Wooming knew. When Wooming saw the divine right seal, Dinger, he understood the mission that Gilgamesh had given to Zhuge Kongming. It was probably to modify the divine right seal, Dinger. It's just as you think, Hyunryong. This king has given the military counselor the task of modifying the divine right seal, Dinger. Chapter 945. King Gilgamesh's seal of divine right, Dinger, is a weapon that uses the magic power generated by the destruction of treasures to cause large-scale damage. Although this weapon has a very obvious effect on killing demonic beasts, its effect on the commander of the demonic beasts is negligible. Zhuge Kongming stepped forward and explained to everyone. Ordinary magical beasts wouldn't be that much stronger even if they were strengthened. However, magical beast commanders were different. Dinger's bombardment couldn't cause the slightest bit of damage to magical beast commanders. The most it could do was burn off some of its fur and scrape off some of its scales. In the face of demons with extremely strong physiques, Gilgamesh entrusted me to modify the seal of divine authority into a weapon that could kill them with a single blow. Therefore, I modified the muzzle of the seal of divine authority into a concentrated cannon. Originally, the seal of divine authority used King Gilgamesh's treasures as bullets and fired them in the form of bullets. Now, it has been converted into a continuous laser radiation. After hitting the target, the energy will spread throughout the target's body and destroy the target's molecular structure. In other words, the seal of divine authority, which was originally an area of effect weapon, had been modified by Zhuge Kongming into a single-target weapon. So that's how it is. It's specially designed to deal with demons. Gadotzi then contacted Roman. "Doctor, what do you think?" Roman, who was in Chaldea, tapped on the keyboard in front of him. Obviously, he was examining and analyzing the seal of divine authority in front of Gadotzi. The muzzle of the seal of divine authority has indeed been converted into a concentrated cannon. However, because Chaldea does not have any specific data on demons, I have no way of determining whether it will be effective against them. You don't have to do it. This king can determine that the new seal of divine authority will definitely be effective against demons. It seemed that Gilgamesh was full of confidence in the new seal of divine authority. He did not know whether it was because he believed in his own judgment or Zhuge Kongming's technology. King Gilgamesh is sensible. After all, it took me 3 months to modify it. Not only demons, but also servants, as long as the target is hit, the only outcome waiting for them is to retreat. Although Zhuge Kongming's words sounded quite lofty, Wu Ming still found a problem. "Military counselor, listening to what you mean, this thing can still miss?" "Yes." This made Gadotzi, Mashu, and even Roman from Chaldea break out in cold sweat. It was the first time that they saw a weapon they designed not being able to hit the enemy, but still being able to say, yes. However, Wu Ming's question was indeed full of problems, so he simply helped Zhuge Kongming to smooth things over. The situation of missing is bound to happen. After all, the damage has changed from an area of effect to a single point. The demons won't stand there stupidly and let you hit them. They just need to aim and fire a few more times. That's impossible. The modified seal of divine authority will be scrapped after firing once. What? Zhuge Kongming's words completely shocked everyone. Although Gilgamesh did not say anything, he also showed a shocked expression. Obviously, Gilgamesh did not expect that Zhuge Kongming would transform the seal of divine authority into this. Then, in that case, wouldn't the seal of divine authority become a consumable? Although Matthew's words contained uncertainty, everyone present understood that the modified seal of divine authority by Zhuge Kongming was indeed a consumable. Then, Zhuge Kongming's expression was quite calm, and he spoke disapprovingly. The magic converted from the destroyed treasures in the seal of divine authority is unstable. That's why it can be used as a cannonball. I stabilized the cannonball's magic and concentrated it at a single point. Not only that, but I also increased the damage by ignoring the burden on the seal of divine authority. Although the cost is the self-destruction of the seal of divine authority, but overall, the damage caused has been increased to the extreme. Then, Zhuge Kongming changed the topic. Although I'm a caster, magician, I'm not good at making items. My ability is more focused on the battlefield. Creating a weapon that can deal extreme damage without causing a burden to the seal of divine authority, Dinger, is slightly beyond my ability. Although Zhuge Kongming belittled himself, the fact that he was able to transform the interior of the Seal of Divine Authority was enough to prove that Zhuge Kongming's ability to make items was not low. After all, the strategist type of caster and the writer type of caster also had drawbacks when making items. But even so, Zhuge Kongming still transformed the Dinger into a satisfactory appearance. In the end, Zhuge Kongming gave a key answer. Moreover, as long as I can hit the monster commander, all the problems will not be a problem, right? Matthew was surprised. Yes, it is indeed as Mr. Kongming said. Although the Seal of Divine Authority can only be used as a one-time consumable, as long as we can hit the monster commander, it will be fine. As long as we can hit the monster commander, we will be able to kill it. Matthew clenched his fists in front of his chest, looking quite cute. However, the expression on everyone's face gave Matthew a look of disapproval. As for the reason, it was very simple. After all, if we use this modified Seal of Divine Authority to attack the monster commander, it will be easy for the monster commander to dodge the attack. Wuming sighed. Even if the monster commander is not aware of the danger, this method can only be used once. After all, the other magical beast commanders weren't blind. If they saw that the Dinger's attack could easily kill a magical beast commander, the other magical beast commanders would definitely pay attention to it. It would be even more difficult to hit it the next time. However, I don't think it will succeed once. After all, monster commanders have senses that are many times better than human beings. Their prediction of danger is also very strong. They will definitely be able to dodge it. As the last straw that broke the camel's back, Roman said a statement that cut off everyone's hope. Sure enough, we can only give up. Gadotzi couldn't help but show a disappointed expression. At this time, Zhuge Kongming confidently interrupted everyone. No, if we use a trick, we can actually let the modified divine power seal, Dinger, attack the demon's commander. Chapter 946. That's right. Zhuge Kongming was an outstanding person in terms of intelligence. Although Zhuge Kongming was not as outstanding as his contemporaries, that didn't mean that Zhuge Kongming wasn't good enough. It was just like how peacocks and phoenixes were not outstanding, but peacocks were much more colorful and outstanding than most birds. And judging from the fact that Zhuge Kongming's plan was effective, Zhuge Kongming's plan wasn't that bad. On the contrary, Zhuge Kongming was a completely trustworthy strategist. The reason why Zhuge Kongming designed the Divine Right Seal, Dinger, to be a powerful attack at the cost of self-destruction was probably because he was confident in his plan. Putting aside the demonic beast commander who was using Enkidu's body, there were still 4 demonic beast commanders that had to be eliminated. If the Divine Right Seal, Dinger, was used properly, it would have a 100% chance of hitting the demonic beast commanders. They would definitely be able to eliminate the demonic beast commanders without using Funbaba or Gugulana. Well, let's listen to this king's words then. This king trusts you a lot, Gilgamesh nodded. It seemed that he valued Zhuge Kongming's brains a lot. At that moment, no one said anything more. After all, Gilgamesh had already said it. By the way, strategist Kongming, how many Divine Right Seals, Dinger, have you modified? However, Zhuge Kongming said a number that made everyone's jaws drop. 1. Suddenly, no one said a word. The air seemed to have frozen. It was silent and cold. Wuming, who was the first to react, reached out his hand and slowly covered his ears. What? Gadotzi, Matthew, Roman, and even Leonardo da Vinci, who had been watching from the side, all let out shocking shouts. The sound waves were like shock waves, even causing the illusion that the entire cave was shaking. By the way, Gil, do you know about this? Wuming slowly put down his hands that were covering his ears and couldn't help but ask Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, who was not affected by Gadotzi and the other's sonic attack, nodded. Indeed, this king knows about this. After all, this is the only dinger that this king gave to military counselor. The others are either in Uruk or in the North Wall. Immediately, everyone revealed a helpless expression. After all this time, it turned out that there was a problem on Gilgamesh's side. No. In fact, even if you give me more dinger, I can only modify one at the moment. 3 months is already my limit. Although Zhuge Kongming said so, there was no trace of shame on his face. Gadotzi and Matthew were still in a state of shock. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in Chaldea, also looked powerless. This turn of events was too much for them to bear. I take back my words of praise for Zhuge Kongming. After spending 3 months, he was only able to modify one dinger. There was no one else in the world who could do that. Thinking about how Zhuge Kongming's Stone Warrior 8 formations covered more than half of Mesopotamia, could it be that Zhuge Kongming's skill points were all spent on formation? Cough. Let's organize the information. All in all, we only have one dinger that can be used on a monster commander, right? Apart from Gilgamesh, everyone, including Zhuge Kongming, nodded silently. Wuming could not help but facepalm. Actually, it was not that bad. After all, at most, they had returned to the state before they met Zhuge Kongming. Since there is only one dinger, let's keep it as a ghost card for now. After all, there was only one modified dinger. There was no way to keep it as a consumable item. It might be useful as a ghost card. By the way, Gil, did you bring me here just to show me this? Previously, Gilgamesh had given orders and criticisms to everyone in the tower. Only Gilgamesh had requested to talk to Wuming privately. Although he had brought along Gadotzi and Matthew, it did not prevent Gilgamesh and Wuming from having a private chat. At the same time, Wuming did not think that Gilgamesh had called him for such a small matter. Even if the modified Seal of Divine Right, Dinger, could destroy the demon commander in one strike, Silent Wonder wouldn't think that it was a big deal. After all, there was no need for Silent Wonder to personally see such a thing. All he needed to do was to display its effects on the battlefield. Of course, there is something else. Gilgamesh showed an expression that said, Hyunryong knows me best. Then, he walked to the corner and knocked on the stone wall. Come here and feel it with your magic. Wuming walked over and placed his hand on the stone wall. Then, he injected his magic into the wall. In an instant, a magnificent 3D projection appeared in Wuming's mind. This was the scene of the area covered by the stone formation. Everything on the ground could be seen clearly by Wuming. Many soldiers in the North Wall were undergoing emergency maintenance as if a war was imminent. Leonidas I was constantly training the soldiers. Carts of supplies were pushed out of a military tent that was much larger than the other military tents. There were also people who could smile even in the face of the monster crisis. What is this? Wuming could not help but look at Gilgamesh who was beside him. The stone formation is used to monitor the situation on the ground. As a result, there is no way for him to investigate the situation on the ground. However, if there is someone with magic with the help of the stone formation, they can detect everything on the ground and underground. It is like a god's perspective. However, Wuming was still puzzled. What did this have to do with him? Wouldn't it be better to just find someone with magic? The reason why I called you over is because I received a mud tablet from the front line. It says that many magical beasts seem to be gathering in Nippur. Just by looking at their numbers, it seems like they are preparing for an unprecedented attack by magical beasts. After hearing Gilgamesh's words, Wuming subconsciously turned his attention to the place outside the North Wall. If there is someone with more powerful magic, they will be able to see further places. Even this king is unable to observe the nearest city. At present, I am afraid that only you, Hyunryong, can do it. Therefore, the reason why Wu Ming was called over was to investigate the truth of the information sent from the front line. After all, the monster wave also had a monster wave commander. It was very likely that the monster wave had confused the humans. Therefore, they had to investigate. As Gilgamesh said, Wu Ming's magic was indeed the highest on their side. Even Ishtar's magic was not comparable to Wu Ming's. Just as Gilgamesh had said, the area covered by the stone soldier formation was only a small part of the northern wall. It was far from the extent of scouting the nearby cities. However, it was probably as Gilgamesh had said. Due to the large amount of mana, Silent Cry was able to see a few kilometers away from the northern wall. Chapter 947. Although he only caught a glimpse of it for a moment, the scene of magical beasts gathering and demons dancing was deeply imprinted in Wu Ming's mind. It was a city that had long been turned into ruins, and there were a large number of magical beasts of various shapes and sizes gathered there. The liger-type magical beasts roared at the sky, while the snake-type magical beasts breathed out on the ground. It was comparable to a group of demons dancing and 100 ghosts walking at night. The number of magical beasts shocked Wu Ming. There were at least tens of thousands of magical beasts. It was hard to imagine that so many magical beasts could gather in such a city. And from the glimpse just now, Wu Ming also saw that many magical beasts were still gathering there. It really looked like they were preparing for a big battle. Your information is correct, Gil. I saw a large number of magical beasts gathering in the ruins of Nippur. There are more than 10,000 magical beasts, and it's still increasing. Wu Ming could not help but frown. Oh, so it's like this. Gilgamesh frowned with his arms crossed in front of his chest. The magical beasts were really preparing for a big general attack. Collis, can you project the scene I just saw from my mind? However, Collis did not answer whether she could or could not. Instead, she began to execute Wu Ming's order. Yes, master. The dragon horn on Wu Ming's head fired a ray of magic at the wall. In an instant, a projected image appeared on the wall. It was the scene that Wu Ming had caught a glimpse of before. Wow! It's really a projection. Gadotzi shouted in surprise and trotted to Wu Ming's side. Sure enough, Miss Collis is very powerful. Matthew was amazed. Although he did not run like Gadotzi, he still walked over. Extracting the scene from Wu Ming's mind in an instant and projecting it, this once again proved that Collis was an advanced magic dress. Sure enough, Collis is a very advanced magic dress. If it was Leonardo da Vinci, it would not be possible to make it. Roman could not help but praise. However, for some reason, Roman's voice stopped abruptly as if fate had grasped his throat. I see, such an ability, it is indeed the work of the Gem Master. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from Gadotzi's bracelet. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss. Gadotzi instantly felt that something was wrong. Not only Gadotzi, but Matthew, who was standing next to Gadotzi, was also shocked. At the same time, Roman, who was in Chaldea with his back facing Leonardo da Vinci, showed an expression that said, I'm done for. Leonardo da Vinci certainly could not make a magic dress like Collis. This was an indisputable fact. However, although it was a fact, whether or not he could say it in front of Leonardo da Vinci was another matter. By the way, the content of this projection is really bad. Even the weakest servant's strength was not comparable to that of a human. It would be great if Mr. Roman could be strangled to death. Leonardo da Vinci said with a smile. People who didn't know would think that he was concerned about someone. Sure enough, Leonardo da Vinci said that he was fine, but his body was particularly in line with his thoughts. Roman felt that if it wasn't for the screen between Wu Ming and Leonardo da Vinci, even if the other party was Wu Ming, Leonardo da Vinci would still dare to go up. I have collected the projection just now, don't forget to analyze it, Leonardo da Vinci said, picked up a cup of coffee on the corner of the table and left. She really went to make coffee just now. Really, leaving things to me again. But when he thought that he just survived Leonardo da Vinci's capture, he didn't say anything more. Roman got up and went to the corner of the table, picked up another cup of coffee on the corner of the table. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just make a cup of coffee. Roman noticed that the staff of Chaldea had turned their eyes to him. Work hard. Then, he reprimanded them in a neither light nor heavy tone. Yes, sure enough, it didn't have much effect, but everyone still gave Roman face and immediately retracted their gaze. Only Roman, who seemed to have accepted his fate, returned to his seat tiredly. Chapter 948. In Zhuge Kongming's workshop, after Gadotsi and Matthew disconnected from Chaldea, they looked at Wu Ming. Assassin, what should we do now? Senior Villo, there are so many magical beasts, we can't just leave them alone. Gadotsi and Matthew directly regarded Wu Ming as their backbone. After making Collis put away the projection, Wu Ming folded his arms and leaned against the smooth wall. We definitely can't just leave them alone, but I can't make up my mind. Under the puzzled eyes of Gadotsi and Matthew, Wu Ming raised his hand and pointed to Gilgamesh, who was standing on the side. Because of his clear vision, Gilgamesh didn't get close to Collis's projection like Gadotsi and Matthew did. Gilgamesh naturally didn't move in the slightest. At this moment, although Gadotsi and Matthew were a little far away from Gilgamesh, they still saw Gilgamesh's expressionless face. Oh, it's over. It seems that our king Gilgamesh is angry. Wu Ming whispered to Gadotsi and Matthew with a mischievous smile. At this moment, Wu Ming resembled Merlin. But it was indeed their fault. The Uruk king was clearly here, and they knew that the magical beasts were about to attack, but they didn't discuss it with the king. Instead, they looked for someone else. This was a crime of disrespect. Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but gulp, and a trace of cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. Obviously, they remembered the scene when they first met Gilgamesh and were almost beaten to death. Noticing Gadotsi and Matthew looking at him, and then looking at Wu Ming's mischievous smile, Gilgamesh, who was originally thinking about something, instantly understood what was going on. Don't worry about this, king, you two can discuss it with Hyunryong. Then, Gilgamesh walked to the other side and called Zhuge Kongming. Counselor, tell this king about your plan for the Dinger. Yes, king. While talking, the two walked to the corner on the other side. I was scared to death. I didn't expect King Gilgamesh to not hold me accountable. Gadotsi patted her slightly raised chest and wiped the sweat on her forehead with the other hand. Sure enough, Gilgamesh is really a virtuous king. Although he was strict with others, he was stricter with himself. However, Matthew's words seemed to have exposed something. Could it be understood that she had never regarded Gilgamesh as a virtuous king? In short, as you can see, my status in the Uruk is actually not low, so you don't have to worry about making Gil unhappy by discussing it with me. Gadotsi and Matthew both looked at Wu Ming with resentment. At this moment, the two of them knew that Wu Ming obviously guessed this result, which was why he stood by and gloated. But when it was time to deal with business, they still had to deal with business. By the way, assassin, what should we do in the face of the demonic beast's attack this time? Because she became the governor of Emperor Nero in the Roman singularity, Gadotsi had a little experience in this kind of large-scale battle, but Gadotsi was still better at small team combat. After all, she was the master. However, even Gadotsi could see that with so many demonic beasts, and with the help of the demonic beast commander, it would be easy to break through the north wall. This was no longer a question of whether they could defend the north wall. The number of demonic beasts was like a natural disaster. Even if they used 300 people to stop tens of thousands of people, Leonidas I, who was good at defense, couldn't stop the natural disaster, right? If I can do it, then it will be easy. Although Wu Ming could probably stop these demonic beasts by using the method he used to kill the demonic beast commander, Eulidim, the north wall might completely collapse. In other words, there would be no way to defend the north wall next time. Moreover, this was the situation without taking into account the demonic beast commander. If there was a demonic beast commander, then the situation would be even worse. I think that the reason why the demonic beasts gathered together and prepared to launch an all-out attack is probably because the number of demonic beasts in the southwest and northeast wall was greatly reduced. They even lost 2 demonic beast commanders, so the other side is probably anxious. That's why they were preparing to take down the Uruk from the north wall in one fell swoop. Let the feathered god and Ishtar support the north wall. Let Ishtar release the sky bowl. During this time, I will try to find Funbaba. At that time, the north wall will definitely be defended. Maybe we can even use this opportunity to kill the other side. As we said that, a cold light flashed in the corner of our eyes. There were only 5 demonic beast commanders left, including the one using Enkidu's body. If they gathered their strength, it wasn't impossible to eliminate all the demonic beast commanders. However, at this time, Gilgamesh interrupted Wu Ming's words. I'm afraid that's not possible. Wu Ming, Gadotzi, and Matthew turned their heads to look at Gilgamesh, who was walking towards them. Behind him was Zhuge Kongming, who had a worried expression, as if something big had happened. Gilgamesh was holding a clay tablet in his clawed hand. His body was surrounded by the golden ripples of the Gate of Babylon, and the tablet looked like it had just been taken out of the Gate of Babylon. This king's tablet can be connected to the words on the tablet that this king left in the Uruk. In short, it was like a modern text message. Gilgamesh casually threw it to Wu Ming. The owner of the tablet in the Uruk is Siduri. This is an emergency communication tool prepared in case something happens when this king goes out. After all, the magical beasts had changed a lot. Although Gilgamesh still went out during his rare free time, he would also leave an emergency communication tool. While Wu Ming was reading the message on the tablet, Gadotzi and Matthew also came over. However, the 2 of them couldn't understand it, so they could only let Wu Ming read it to them. The jungle is in an emergency. A large number of magical beasts are attacking. Wu Ming couldn't help but frown. After so many magical beasts in Nippur City in the north, they could still arrange magical beasts to attack the jungle in the south. How many magical beasts did the goddess of Warcraft produce? Wu Ming finally understood. The plan of the magical beast commanders had never changed. Just as Merlin said, the magical beasts might set up multiple routes as the main force to encircle and attack. The magical beasts gathered in Nippur City were indeed the main force, but the main force couldn't be in one place. As long as the magical beast commanders had enough soldiers, the main force could be set up in multiple places. The magical beasts attacking the jungle in the south were another main force. The magical beasts want to attack us from both the north and the south. It seemed that the magical beasts really wanted to take down the Uruk along with the Quetzalcoatl, and they seemed to have the strength to do so. There's no time to delay. Tachika Fujimaru, Matthew Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh looked serious and turned to Gadotzi and Matthew. You 2 return to the Uruk and take Merlin and Anna to the jungle in the south to support the Quetzalcoatl. The vacation is temporarily cancelled. When the magical beasts are defeated, the vacation will be doubled. Yes. King Gilgamesh. Chapter 949. Gadotzi and Matthew responded, but just as they were about to move, Wu Ming pressed on their shoulders. I'll send you there. Wu Ming had been to the southern Quetzalcoatl's jungle and also to the Uruk. He could use the portal to pick people up and send them directly to the southern jungle. However, Gilgamesh rejected Wu Ming's suggestion. No, you have other more important tasks, so you must stay here. Wu Ming frowned subconsciously. He felt that it wouldn't take much time to send them there, but since Gilgamesh said so, there must be a reason. In the next second, Gilgamesh said the reason. Although the southern jungle is in an emergency, the tropical rainforest is a natural barrier, so it's not that serious. On the contrary, we may be attacked by a large number of magical beasts at any time. If the northern wall was breached, then humans would be completely finished. Without the defense of the northern wall, magical beasts could invade humans at any time and anywhere. In other words, Wu-Ming had to stay in the northern wall as insurance. At this moment, Wu-Ming could only accept his fate. Then, Wu-Ming turned to look at Gadotzi and Matthew. In that case, you can only find a way to rush to the southern jungle. Don't worry about this king will let Siduri take Fujimaru, Merlin, and the others to the jungle. Gilgamesh interrupted with confidence. As for how to send Gadotzi and the others to the southern jungle, Wu-Ming didn't know. But since Gilgamesh said so, it must be certain. With his hands crossed, Gilgamesh walked in front of Gadotzi and Matthew, and his tone became stern. This is your second mission, and I don't want to see the same result as the first mission, do you understand? Yes. Gilgamesh's serious look had a big impact on Gadotzi and Matthew. The two couldn't help but straighten their backs and answer Gilgamesh. Finally, Zhuge Kongming spoke. Then, let me help you return to the Uruk from here. Gadotzi and Matthew were puzzled. It was already very fast to pass through the passage. Did Zhuge Kongming have a faster way? Zhuge Kongming came to one of the 8 stone platforms placed in the center. He opened the stone platform like opening a box and took out a strange wooden tool that looked like a cart with a wooden bull's head. Following the same pattern, Zhuge Kongming took out another similar tool from another stone platform as if he was opening a box. However, this tool had a wooden horse's head. Mr. Kongming, what's this? Matthew didn't recognize what it was. Zhuge Kongming took out a feather fan from somewhere. He held the feather fan and waved it as he spoke. The item I made is called wooden ox horse. Wooden ox horse. Is that the wooden ox horse? Gadotzi was shocked. Although it's not a noble artifact, it's almost there. Zhuge Kongming nodded. He wasn't surprised that Gadotzi and Matthew from the future knew about the wooden ox horse. Anyone who had read the novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms or knew about Zhuge Kongming would know about the existence of the wooden ox horse. However, there were different opinions about the inventor. Some said that Zhuge Kongming's wife, Huang Yueying, invented it. Some said that Zhuge Kongming invented it himself, and some said that the two of them invented it together. But who invented it wasn't the main point. The main point was that the wooden ox horse was a transportation tool that wasn't worse than modern times. It could travel 30 miles for groups and dozens of miles for special travelers. That was the evaluation of the wooden ox horse. The general idea was simple and clear. Anyway, it could quickly transport goods. As long as the two of you sit on it, you can reach Uruk from the passage in an instant. Ha! Gadotzi and Matthew were shocked by Zhuge Kongming's words. Could it really be that fast? Seeing a trace of doubt in their eyes, Zhuge Kongming didn't explain too much. They would know after using it. Anyway, the two of you sit on it first. Zhuge Kongming waved his feather fan, and the two wooden ox horses beside him instantly moved. They rushed directly behind Gadotzi and Matthew, gently bumped their legs, and directly put the two people who subconsciously squatted in the back pocket of the wooden ox horse. Wait a minute, it's a little crowded. After all, it was used to transport goods. Although it could carry people, the space on the back of the wooden ox horse was a little narrow. The two couldn't adjust their bodies for a while. It was as if their butts had sunk into the toilet bowl, and they looked quite embarrassed at the moment. Fortunately, Gadotzi was wearing a formal dress, and Matthew was wearing a heroic spirit costume, otherwise, they would definitely be exposed. However, even if they weren't exposed, the embarrassment brought about by the limited cooperation between the two of them could still stimulate some perverted desires. Before Gadotzi and Matthew could fully adjust their bodies, Zhuge Kongming immediately ordered the wooden ox horse. "There's no time to lose, let's go." In an instant, the two wooden ox horses carrying Gadotzi and Matthew rushed directly in the direction of the gate that everyone had entered before at a speed faster than a modern sports car, but strangely, there was a wall there. Zhuge Kongming snapped his fingers, and a part of the wall automatically split open, forming a door, allowing the two wooden ox horses to rush out. "Ah!" Gadotzi and Matthew screamed from the door that had not yet closed. Wuming estimated that it was almost the same feeling as riding a roller coaster. "I've modified this path. Not only can it shorten the distance and increase the speed of travel, but it's also a branch that my stone formation 8 formations can cover underground. More importantly, this path can make the wooden ox move faster." "I see, that's why it can return to the Uruk in an instant." Wuming nodded silently, but Wuming was quite interested in the branch that Zhuge Kongming mentioned. According to Zhuge Kongming, Stone Army 8 formations probably relied on this so-called branch to extend and cover more than half of Mesopotamia. "Counselor, is there only one branch?" Wuming felt that since this passage was a branch that covered more than half of Mesopotamia, there should be more than one. After all, this branch alone couldn't cover all of it. This passage is specially connected to the Uruk, and there are 7 other endings that connect to 7 places on the northern wall. Chapter 950. After Zhuge Kongming finished, he snapped his fingers again and 7 doors suddenly appeared on the stone walls around the magic workshop. If the door leading to the Uruk was included, there were exactly 8 doors. And looking at it carefully, the 8 doors corresponded to the 8 stone platforms in the center one by one. It seemed that there was some kind of connection between the 8 doors and the 8 stone platforms. This was probably the so-called formation. These 7 tunnels were opened by me using wooden oxen and flowing horses. They extend in all directions and cover the land behind the north wall. It turned out that wooden ox could be used like this. It was worthy of being a prop made by a servant. It could be used as a tool to dig tunnels. It was really tough. Moreover, the passages of the other 7 doors are completely connected to each other. So, the soldiers in the north wall can be deployed quickly. In other words, the passages of these 7 doors were the same as the one connected to the Uruk. It had a similar effect of acceleration. According to Zhuge Kongming's previous statement, the ends of these 7 passages were connected to 7 places near the north wall. In this way, these passages could not only be used as branches for the stone formation to cover the underground, but also allow the soldiers to move quickly. Deployment, support, supply, etc., could be completed very quickly. Moreover, these passages were connected to 7 places in the north wall. With Leonidas I's defense and Zhuge Kongming's strategy, it was not unreasonable for the north wall to not be breached until today. "My king, do you want to go to the north wall or return to the Uruk? I still have 6 wooden ox. No matter where you want to go, I can send you there in an instant." "Of course it's the Uruk, idiot. This king is relieved to leave the north wall to Leonidas. But if this king and Siduri are not in the Uruk, it will be chaotic." This was not a lie. Although Gilgamesh going to the north wall could increase the morale of the soldiers, the overall situation was still more important. As Gilgamesh just said, Siduri will take Gadotzi and others to the southern jungle. If there was no one in the Uruk who could control the overall situation, something would definitely happen. But this king doesn't need your wooden ox. This king can go back by himself. After Gilgamesh finished, he threw himself into the door and was buried in the darkness of the passage. But after seeing how Gadotzi and Matthew were sent back, who would want to ride Zhuge Kongming's wooden ox? In that case, I will go directly to the north wall. After stretching his body, Wu Ming looked at Zhuge Kongming. Is there a direct passage to the surface? You can go directly to the north wall. Wu Ming was going to go to the north wall to see the situation before making a decision. However, when Wu Ming left, the north wall was not built yet, so Wu Ming couldn't use the portal. Moreover, this place was still deep underground. Although Wu Ming had the ability to drill out of the ground, he couldn't really do it. Zhuge Kongming seemed to be a little obsessed with the wooden ox. Gilgamesh didn't succeed, so Zhuge Kongming started to attack Wu Ming. I can use it. However, Zhuge Kongming just said a few words, but he was directly interrupted by Wu Ming. No, I am quite confident in my speed. The scene fell into silence. I see. In that case, follow my wooden ox. It will guide you to the right way to the north wall. Please. After that, Zhuge Kongming opened another stone platform and took out a new wooden ox, and Wu Ming followed the wooden ox into one of the 7 passages. So, what should I do next? Zhuge Kongming muttered to himself. After all, Gilgamesh didn't give him any orders before leaving. While thinking, Zhuge Kongming couldn't help but turn his eyes to the only modified divine power seal, Dinger, placed in the center of his workshop and fell into silence. On the other side, Wu Ming, who was moving very quickly with the wooden ox, also found the light in front. We probably reached the surface. At the same time, Wu Ming also found that the wooden ox that led him began to turn back. It seemed that he should have reached his destination. Collis, can you speculate our current location? Wu Ming's dragon horn headdress made a beep sound, then it turned into a female voice. Master, we are currently near the Euphrates River. There are life signs around us. The characteristics of life signs are human. Preliminary inference is that this place is similar to the rear supply barracks. It seems that the wooden ox didn't take Wu Ming to the north wall. It just gave Wu Ming a random exit that connected to the surface. However, this was indeed in line with Wu Ming's previous request. But Wu Ming thought that there were no additional exits. He originally thought that he would reach the north wall when he reached the surface. It turns out that there are other exits besides the north wall. Zhuge Kongming didn't even say anything, but thinking about it carefully, Zhuge Kongming did only say that the end of the 7 passages is located at the north wall. Zhuge Kongming didn't lie, but at the same time, he didn't say everything. In short, although Wu Ming wasn't indirectly cheated by Zhuge Kongming, it was still a small joke that wasn't serious. That old fox, he must have taken the opportunity to retaliate against me because I rejected him. With a helpless smile, Wu Ming didn't care about this anymore. After all, it was just a harmless joke. Walking toward the place where there was light, Wu Ming found that this was actually the interior of a large tent. Wu Ming had seen such a tent before. There were such tents near the north wall. Wu Ming also saw carts full of supplies being pushed out of the tents before. It turns out that those tents are actually the exits of the passage. The troops here were judged by Collis to be the logistics troops, and they could definitely reach the north wall from this passage. This also explained where the supplies came from. It seems that Zhuge Kongming was not just holed up in his workshop in the past 3 months when he was summoned by Gilgamesh. Whether it was the wooden ox or the underground maze-like passages, they were all personally planned by Zhuge Kongming. Perhaps there were also entrances to the underground passages in the logistics barracks. Zhuge Kongming is really a great strategist. He is really thoughtful about logistics. This was the so-called, before the troops and horses move, the provisions will move first. In that case, I will rely on my own strength to go to the north wall. Wu Ming said a few words to the people in the logistics camp. Then, under their respectful and shocked gazes, Wu Ming flew up into the sky and headed for the northern wall. Chapter 951. As the saying goes, the higher you stand, the further you can see. Wu Ming, who was flying in the sky, could easily see the north wall. Wu Ming once again sighed as he looked at the north wall that traversed the east and west of Mesopotamia not far away. This north wall was built by manpower. If it could be passed down to future generations, it would certainly become an ancient monument not inferior to the pyramids and the Great Wall. After all, it was a defensive barrier against monsters. However, the north wall would not be passed down to future generations. After all, it was a special place called Singularity. Things in Singularity would be corrected by correct history. Perhaps it would be more serious than the legendary Hanging Courtyard of Babylon. The north wall would be completely lost in the long river of history. However, he still had to overcome the difficulties in front of him. Otherwise, forget about future generations, the entire history of mankind may disappear. Collis, help me find the place with the most prominent signs of life as a landing point. The most prominent signs of life represented the most people. In this case, the chances of encountering the commander of the North Wall would be higher. Wu Ming searched for signs of life below and came to the place with the most prominent signs of life. The soldiers below naturally noticed Wu Ming in the sky. They originally thought that it was an enemy attack, but it turned out to be their god. Is that Hyunryong Sama? Hyunryong Sama has come to the North Wall. Hyunryong Sama. In an instant, the soldiers began to cheer and shouted at Wu Ming. The gods of the gods era were absolute to humans. They were even more powerful than human kings. Although the current Mesopotamia was at the end of the gods era, the people here were still full of respect for the gods. However, this made Wu Ming very helpless. He didn't know what to say. Why did the gods like to spread their faith and collect believers everywhere? Because the ancient human hearts were very simple. If you were good to them, they would praise you, welcome you, and praise you. Besides the evil gods, who didn't like such humans? Wu Ming didn't put on airs and flew straight down. It could be seen that these soldiers were conscientious in their duties. Even in the face of their Lord God, the soldiers who were guarding their posts did not move at all. Other things aside, Leonidas I's training of the soldiers did make them more dutiful. However, the nearby soldiers and logistics personnel who were not in important positions all came to Wu Ming's side and knelt down. Even the soldiers who were standing guard at their posts bowed to Wu Ming in respect of the gods. I didn't come here to accept your worship. All of you, return to your posts. You are the front line, and the safety of the rear is at stake. Therefore, move out. Wu Ming's last sentence was infused with magic. His voice, which was full of majesty but not strict, was transmitted to the ears of everyone present. Oh, oh, oh. His sonorous and forceful words filled everyone's ears, causing them to cheer energetically. Although, in accordance with the will of the god, everyone returned to their posts. Sir Hyunryong, why are you here today? A rough voice with a hint of delicacy came from afar. Wu Ming looked up. It was a brawny man with most of his skin exposed. He was wearing a Spartan-style helmet and a red cloak. His exposed skin was full of explosive muscles, giving people an extreme sense of security. So it's the king of Sparta. It's been a long time. Wu Ming showed a relieved expression. The person who came was one of the lancers summoned by Gilgamesh, the king of Sparta, Leonidas I. Wu Ming only saw him once when Leonidas I was summoned. After that, Wu Ming quickly left. It seemed that Wu Ming's idea was right. The place with the most prominent signs of life was indeed the force commander, Leonidas I. Just call me Leonidas. After all, I'm now the subject of the king of Gilgamesh. It was inappropriate for a subject to call himself a king. Leonidas said as he walked in front of Wu Ming. You look good. The soldiers have also been trained by you to be so strong. No wonder you're the king of Sparta. After all, Sparta had become a special synonym in the future. The humans of this era are strong and have an extremely simple temperament. I didn't spend much effort to train them. Wu Ming nodded. It's good that you're satisfied with the physical fitness of the humans of this era. By the way, I'm here on the orders of King Gilgamesh. However, Wu Ming only said this, and Leonidas guessed the reason. It's because of the information I sent to Uruk. The suspected gathering of a large number of demonic beasts was enough to attract attention. Yes, I took over the military advisor's workshop to explore. I did see a large number of demonic beasts gathering in the city of Nippur. Wu Ming told him the information he received. Have you been to the military advisor's workshop? If it's you, you can indeed see that scene. The existence of Zhuge Kongming was not a secret to Leonidas I. When Gilgamesh summoned again and selected many servants to carry out the decapitation plan, Leonidas I, who was burning with passion, also wanted to participate. This kind of suicidal behavior was similar to Leonidas I leading 300 people to fight against the Persian army. It could be said that it was the most exciting thing to arouse Leonidas I's passion. In the end, he was stopped by Zhuge Kongming, who advised him. Only then did Leonidas I settle down. After all, as a defensive talent who led a mere 300 people to delay the Persian army until the Allies retreated, how could he be a suicide squad? The most important thing to highlight Leonidas I's value was the defense against the demonic beasts in the North Wall. And Leonidas I did not disappoint everyone's expectations of him, and he did not disappoint himself. He successfully led the humans to resist the attack of the demonic beasts for half a year. However, this time it's really a total attack of the demonic beasts. Leonidas I's face, which could not be seen by others because of the helmet, showed a trace of relief. He also guessed that this would be the result. As a soldier, a king, Leonidas I had been collecting information from Uruk, and he was also aware of the turmoil in the southwest and northeast. The attacks of the demonic beasts in both places ended in failure. Perhaps the only choice was to gather the demonic beasts to attack the North Wall. If this dragged on, it would indeed have a negative impact on the demonic beasts. Not only that, just now, we received news that the territory of the Quetzalcoatl has also suffered a fierce attack from the demonic beasts. Chaldea's group has been sent by King Gilgamesh to support them. Could it be? Leonidas I seemed to have thought of something, and his voice became surprised. It's probably as you think. The demonic beasts are preparing to attack the humans from all directions, and at the same time, eliminate the Quetzalcoatl. To be able to attack the remaining humans in Mesopotamia from the north and south, and also prepare to eliminate the pillar goddess of the Three Goddesses Alliance, the other party must have sufficient confidence to do so. In this way, the number of demonic beasts was probably unimaginable. This is really crazy. Leonidas gasped. But isn't this also the beginning of our counterattack? If the demonic beasts were to attack in full force, the remaining 5 demonic beast commanders would definitely appear. After all, the battlefield was split into the southern forest and the north wall. If it was really a general attack, there was a high chance that Gorgon would appear. If Wu Ming and the others took the opportunity to eliminate Gorgon who had Tiamat's authority, then the humans in Mesopotamia would be able to overcome this crisis. Among the Three Goddesses Alliance, the Quetzalcoatl was the most rebellious and stood on the side of the humans. The underworld goddess Ereshkigal could not leave the underworld. More importantly, Ereshkigal's attitude towards the humans was similar to that of the Quetzalcoatl. Although they had only met once, Wu Ming's intuition told him that Ereshkigal was a goddess who wanted to help the humans. It was probably like how the Quetzalcoatl was preparing to use her own methods to save the humans. Therefore, as long as the demonic beasts and the goddess of demonic beasts were eliminated, then they could deal with Ereshkigal who was thinking for the humans. At that time, when she found out that 2 of the 3 goddesses had been defeated by the humans, and she became a threat to the humans in Mesopotamia, Ereshkigal would probably give up on being the enemy of the humans. Because there were enemies that threatened the humans, Ereshkigal would provide special assistance to the humans. But if one day, all the enemies that threatened the humans disappeared, and her special method of assistance became the last enemy that threatened the humans, was there a need to continue? With Ereshkigal's dignified personality, she would probably stop. Therefore, it was not a bad idea to wipe out the forces of the magical beast goddess that had come out in full force. While thinking, Wuming said, "That's why Gilgamesh sent me to the North Wall." As for whether it was Gilgamesh's idea, it didn't matter. Anyway, Gilgamesh would definitely allow Wuming to act on his own. So that's how it is. Leonidas I also understood what Wuming meant. This was indeed a good way to deal with the goddess of magical beasts, and it was to deal with her in one go. But you have to be prepared, because I'm the only one who can support the North Wall. These words surprised Leonidas I again. Northwest is Abif Mountain, the territory of the Mistress of the Heavens, Goddess Ishtar. There was a big change in that direction before. It should be because you and Ishtar fought. I heard that Goddess Ishtar has been subdued by you. Can't she come to support you? Probably because of the existence of the feathered serpent god, the accelerated tunnel, and other convenient means of communication, Leonidas I had already received the news that Uruk Hyunryong has subdued the Mistress of the Heavens, Goddess Ishtar. Wuming didn't mean to hide it, and since Leonidas I also knew about this, then Wuming had to inform Leonidas I about the specific situation. Indeed, as you receive the news, Goddess Ishtar is now on our side, but she's not free. When I was flying in the sky just now, I sent her a message. I asked her to support other places. Is it the territory of the southern feathered serpent god? Isn't there already support from Chaldea there? Leonidas I was quite puzzled. Although the enemy was divided into two parts to attack, the North Wall was much more dangerous and important than the forest of the feathered serpent god. Leonidas I didn't understand. How could Wuming ignore the overall situation? However, the truth was not what Leonidas I thought. I didn't ask her to support the feathered serpent god. Then, Wuming looked to the southeast. I asked her to go to the Persian Gulf. Southeast, near the Persian Gulf. Ishtar was flying on Anna, who was sitting on the sky ship, toward the Persian Gulf with a look of displeasure. Damn Hyunryong, is he really going to squeeze me to the extreme? Ishtar was quite angry at the moment. Ishtar was flying freely in the sky before, fully relieving the anger she suffered from Gilgamesh. However, just now, Wuming used the connection between the two sides after signing the contract to give Ishtar an order. Wuming's order was like this. Go to the Persian Gulf to investigate. If you encounter demonic beasts, stop them and don't let them come ashore. However, Ishtar scoffed. At most, there are some Kururu that accidentally flowed here along the Euphrates River and the Tigris River. Not to mention that these demonic beasts can't set off a storm, moreover, Kururu can only move in the water. Ishtar stopped and looked at the Persian Gulf below, full of resentment. In the end, because it's related to the demonic beasts, I can't refuse that bastard's order. So, Ishtar, who didn't know that there was an emergency in the North Wall and the South Jungle, thought that we were playing tricks on her. She came to the Persian Gulf with grief and helplessness in her heart. There are no demonic beasts here. Not to mention the demonic beasts that can go ashore, the Kururu in the water almost disappeared during this time. Ishtar patrolled the waters of the Persian Gulf, ignoring the kneeling humans on the ground, and ended the patrol. There are no demonic beasts at all, let's go. At the moment, Ishtar wanted to leave here and find a family with a lot of gemstones to do a good deal to ease her current bad mood. However, at this moment, there was a sudden magical reaction under the water of the Persian Gulf. Ishtar noticed it in an instant, but then, her eyes widened. At this moment, Ishtar also understood that Wuming was not playing tricks on her. Demonic beasts really appeared in the Persian Gulf. And the number was extremely shocking. Chapter 952. This magic. How many magical beasts are there? Feeling the rapid emergence of a large amount of magic in the Persian Gulf, Ishtar's voice could not help but tremble. The magic emitted by each magical beast was not amazing. What shocked Ishtar was the number of magical beasts emitting magic. Ants were not terrible, but if there were a large number of ants, they could bite an elephant to death. However, not to mention biting an elephant to death, if there were enough ants, they could drown an elephant just by relying on their numbers. The amazing magic that emerged from the Persian Gulf was caused by the convergence of a large number of magical beasts. Because of the large number of magical beasts emitting magic, the surface of the Persian Gulf even became a little turbulent, like the coast was about to be hit by a storm. The people at the Persian Gulf Observatory also noticed the turbulence in the Persian Gulf and went to the seaside to check the situation. However, they saw a figure emerge from the Persian Gulf. There are humans in the sea. Looking at the figure, it seemed to be a woman. The people who saw this scene were shocked. They thought that someone had fallen into the water and immediately prepared to save the person who had fallen into the water. However, before they could act, one figure after another emerged from the water, and the strange thing was that these figures all looked the same. This strange scene made the people standing by the sea fall into silence, as if they could not react. No. No. That's the magical beast Kururu. It was unknown who suddenly said this, but the silence turned into panic before anyone could react. Everyone looked again. The figures in the water were not people who had fallen into the water. They were clearly ugly magical beasts with the lower body of a fish and the upper body of a human. After all, even if there was only one magical beast, it was extremely fatal to non-combatants like them, not to mention that there was more than one here. Don't panic. I remember King Gilgamesh said that this magical beast called Kururu can only move in the water. There is no example of it going ashore. Although this person's voice was quite panicked, it reminded everyone. There weren't many mass-produced magical beasts in Kururu that entered the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. After Gilgamesh sent people to clean them up for a few days, these magical beasts basically disappeared from the Persian Gulf. Although there might have been some lucky survivors, the people here had never encountered them again. It was true that he hadn't encountered any before, but it wasn't a good thing to encounter such a large number of magical beasts. Fortunately, the magical beasts they encountered were Kururu and couldn't go ashore. Otherwise, they would be in danger. Thinking of this, the surrounding people gradually calmed down, and even bravely observed the large number of Kururu in the water. Some of them only had a little contact with this kind of magical beast, and some didn't even have the slightest contact with it. Humans were always curious about the unknown, which led to the next scene. Although this magical beast looks like a human, it is still a little ugly. And it looks like a woman, but it's really not pleasing to the eye. That's right, the other magical beasts are wild beasts, but why do these Kururu look so strange? Probably because they can only live in the water. It didn't matter if they were bold or fearless. In short, because they weren't threatened by the life-threatening danger, they all began to criticize Kururu. Ishtar, who was flying in the sky, saw the behavior of these humans, and Ishtar commented on it. These fools. It was normal for humans to not know about magical beasts, but as a member of the gods, Ishtar knew about them. Although Ishtar had never seen this kind of magical beast, from the past rumors, Ishtar knew that these magical beasts didn't only live in the water. After all, they were also known as the winged mermaid. As the name implied, they had wings. Poochie, as if something had broken out of its body, a pair of large wings grew out of the back of a Kururu. Then, the wings on the back of the Kururu flapped slowly, bringing the Kururu into the air. The tail of its lower body was still flapping subconsciously, as if it was a little uncomfortable. Then, one by one, the kururu came out of the back of a large number of kururu, and a pair of wings grew out of the back of a large number of kururu, bringing countless of them into the sky together. The magical beasts, kururu, also known as the winged mermaid, all flew into the sky while the nearby humans were in a daze. It's over. It was unknown who said this, but the atmosphere of despair spread among the crowd. Facing the magical beasts, kururu that could fly out of the water and into the sky, there was only one outcome for these non-combatants, and that was death. Some people even sat on the ground as if they had completely given up, quietly waiting for the arrival of death. At this moment, a voice like the cry of the goddess of victory sounded in everyone's ears. And Gal Tak Hygel Shi, mountain-shaking star salary. A dazzling light comparable to Venus directly hit the group of kururu magical beasts in the sky, and an explosion occurred suddenly. Boom! The light covered everyone's eyes, and in the next second, the crowd screamed in panic. Wah! Due to the airflow caused by the explosion, the people were scared shitless. But fortunately, no one was in life-threatening danger. The wind and waves soon subsided, and when people looked up to check the situation, they saw the goddess of Venus. Mistress of the heavens. It's Lady Ishtar. It's Lady Ishtar, the goddess who often plunder my family's gems. Lady Ishtar saved us. Ignoring some of the strange sentences, Ishtar's ears were filled with the cheers of the humans for her. After seeing the goddess, the people no longer panicked, not only because Ishtar saved them, but also because the humans' dependence on the goddess had an important impact on them. Tell everyone nearby to retreat and report the situation here to the Uruk. I'll hold off the magical beasts here for the time being. Ishtar was like a heroine, valiantly giving orders to the people. Yes, Lady Ishtar. We'll follow your orders. After kneeling and thanking Ishtar, the people quickly left the area, called the nearby humans, and moved toward the Uruk. Chapter 953. At this moment, Ishtar, who noticed that everyone had left, was elated. Yes. I've wanted to say this for a long time. Acting cool is indeed the best. My prestige has been spread once again. At this moment, Ishtar seemed a little unreliable. However, Ishtar was not arrogant enough to think that she could eliminate all the demonic beasts in the Persian Gulf with a reduced version of her relic. Ishtar turned her head to look at the Persian Gulf. The smoke from the explosion gradually dispersed. As expected, there were still many kururu in the sky above the Persian Gulf. These were not the kururu that Ishtar had hit. Those kururu that were hit by Ishtar had fallen into the water. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. These were the kururu that took the opportunity to fly up after the explosion. Hiss! The kururu, who were obviously mermaids, made a snake-like sound and rushed towards Ishtar. Whoosh! A ray of light shot out from the launch port of Tianzhou's horse Anna and directly hit the kururu at the front. The power of the light directly blew the kururu into pieces and even affected the surrounding kururu. Ishtar kept his left arm pointing straight forward and his right hand under his left elbow. A smile appeared on his face. It was a beautiful smile full of confidence. Anyone who saw this scene would be captivated by Ishtar's smile at this moment. Unfortunately, only the unromantic and extremely ugly kururu could see this scene. Demonic beasts were originally beasts. Since they were beasts, they should appear in the form of beasts. However, these mermaids had a similar body shape to humans. To put it simply, they were demonic beasts that had the appearance of humans. This caused these mermaids to look extremely ugly. Their long cheeks spread out from both sides of their faces and their mouths were filled with shark-like teeth. Their heads, shoulders, arms, elbows, and spines were filled with a single saw-like fin. It was as if they were born to kill. Even the webbing between their claws had become extremely sharp and could be used as thin and transparent blades. What looked like a female's chest was actually two lumps of pectoral fins that were curled together. There was also a tail that was like a cape on its waist. Further down, its lower body was completely a thick fishtail. Its skin was covered with greenish-brown scales. Its blood-red eyes were filled with killing intent and hatred towards humans. This was the same gaze as other demonic beasts. Although I was forced by that bastard Hyunryong, since I'm here, I naturally have no reason to let you go. Be prepared. In the next second, countless rays of light like curved bullets flew towards the group of Kururu demonic beasts that were rushing towards Ishtar. An explosion suddenly occurred. However, Ishtar, who was bombarding the winged Kururu in the sky, did not notice that in the depths of the Persian Gulf, there was a scarlet eye that was different from the other Kururu demonic beasts. It was quietly watching this scene. On the north wall, Leonidas had also finished listening to Wu Ming's explanation. I see. You thought that demonic beasts would appear in the Persian Gulf, so you sent Lady Ishtar there. This was indeed possible. Leonidas might not know, but Wu Ming had already learned the intentions of the demonic beasts from Merlin. They were preparing to attack the Uruk from all directions. The demonic beasts' commanders did not know that Merlin had used Ulidim as a tool to collect information, so their plan was likely to proceed as usual. Although there was a defense in the Persian Gulf, the defense there was basically prepared to deal with the Kururu that might exist in the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The Persian Gulf in the southeast could be said to be safer than the North Wall, the South Jungle, the Western Mountains, and even the Northeastern Mountains. After all, it was adjacent to the Indian Ocean, and the demonic beasts could not pass through the surrounding areas to reach there. The only danger was the Kururu that came from the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. However, the Kururu could not go ashore. In a sense, this was not a danger in the case of proper defense. Not to mention, Gilgamesh had sent people to hunt down the Kururu in the river and the Persian Gulf. Although Gilgamesh knew that there were Kururu demonic beasts in the river and the Persian Gulf, he had no way to deal with them. After all, as long as the Kururu escaped to the bottom of the river or sneaked into the Persian Gulf, humans would not be able to do anything to these demonic beasts. However, with Zhuge Ming's stone formation covering most of the Uruk, there would be no new Kururu entering the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Therefore, as long as the river was well defended and targeted at the remaining Kururu in the Persian Gulf, the area around the Persian Gulf was basically safer than the Uruk. No matter how one looked at it, it was foolproof. However, Wu Ming did not think so. Now, there was no place that was absolutely safe in the Uruk. The safer the place, the more likely it was to be dangerous. The Uruk was in the center, but it was still attacked by one of the demonic beast commanders, Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao. The Persian Gulf was only far from the North Wall, so it could not be classified as safe. Therefore, Wu Ming asked Ishtar to go to the Persian Gulf to see the situation. If there were no demonic beasts, Ishtar would directly come to the North Wall for support. However, if there were demonic beasts, Ishtar would be responsible for eliminating them. With the Bull of Heaven, Ishtar would not be afraid even if she faced a demonic beast commander. No, meeting a demonic beast commander was what Wu Ming wanted. Because this way, he could take advantage of this opportunity to eliminate another demonic beast commander. But this is also good. If there are demonic beasts there and no one to deal with them, the Uruk and even the entire Mesopotamia may be completely finished. If a large number of demonic beasts or even demonic beast commanders appeared in the Persian Gulf, whether it was the North Wall or the Quetzalcoatl in the southern jungle, they would not be able to provide support to the Persian Gulf. Needless to say, the southern jungle would have already started fighting with the demonic beasts. As for the North Wall, they would probably have already started fighting with the demonic beasts. For the same reason, there would be no way to send reinforcements. Just as Leonidas was sighing, Wu Ming noticed that Ishtar's magical power was being drained by a large amount from the contract he signed with Ishtar. It seemed that Wu Ming was right. Demonic beasts had appeared in the Persian Gulf, and there were a lot of them. Otherwise, Ishtar would not have to spend so much effort. It seems that Ishtar has already started fighting with the demonic beasts. I can feel that she is using a lot of magical power from the contract. Leonidas could not help but feel excited. It seems that you are right, Sir Hyunryong. But just as Leonidas was in awe again, the ancient clock hanging high up on the northern wall rang out crisp and incessant. Ding, 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 ding. As the clock rang, the soldiers on the north wall who were on alert shouted, "The demonic beasts are coming." Chapter 954. Sir Hyunryong, I'll take my leave first, Leonidas said in a hurry. Then, 2 streams of mana gathered in Leonidas's hands and turned into a heavy spear and a small metal shield. Leonidas then walked towards the north wall. The sound of the bell was still rippling. The sound of the bell spread from here to the other parts of the north wall. For a time, the people of the north wall were mobilized. Wuming flew up into the sky and let Collis project the situation of the north wall in front of him. Wuming could now see the situation of the north wall. Wuming wanted to see how the humans were relying on the north wall to defend against the magical beasts. Everyone at the north wall moved. The soldiers were fully armed and ready to fight. The logistics personnel stopped what they were doing and put the things in their hands in the corner to avoid affecting the soldiers' movements. Then, the logistics personnel retreated to a safe area. On the north wall, the soldiers were ready with bows and arrows. But for some reason, they were hidden in the battlements of the north wall. On the ground, the experienced soldiers were holding spears and shields. They came to a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall and waited for the arrival of the magical beasts. These barricades were made of thick wood. They were specially placed in front of the north wall to defend against the magical beasts. After all, they couldn't really use the wall to defend against the magical beasts every time they attacked. If the attackers were humans, they wouldn't have to set up a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall. This was because humans weren't like the magical beasts who were full of weapons and full of aggressiveness. If the magical beasts were left alone, they would attack the north wall. The sheer number of magical beasts was enough to cause damage to the north wall that couldn't be repaired in time. Therefore, a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall was set up as a new layer of insurance. The barricade could let the soldiers' spears pass through. If the magical beasts hit the barricade, they would definitely die. Therefore, the magical beasts could only jump over the barricade. Like now. The mass-produced Ulidim and Ujar rushed to the barricade in front of the north wall because of their mobility. The long spears seemed to be waiting for the right moment, and when the magic beasts were about to reach them, they instantly shot out from the gaps in the fence. However, at this moment, the distance between the magic beast and the fence was enough for it to react. The only thing it could do was to jump over the fence that wasn't that high. However, when the magical beast jumped into the air, spears sprang up like bamboo shoots after a rain, and the spears suddenly grew out, and their positions were exactly where the magical beast was falling, sentencing the magical beast to death before it even landed on the ground. This was a tactic used by humans to deal with brainless magical beasts. One after another, the magical beasts repeated the same actions, constantly sending themselves to their deaths. Although the humans were having a harder time, they had the advantage of not suffering any casualties. However, there would always be casualties in war. There was no war without casualties, unless the time was not right. Just like now. A large number of four-legged lizard-like Musu and Hushio arrived at the front line. Due to their short legs, they were much slower than Ujar and Ulidim. However, their bodies were covered in thick scales. They could easily withstand the spears sticking out of the fence and attack the fence. Immediately after, a red, short, and thin three-headed snake darted out from Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao's body, slithering through the gaps in the fence where the humans had placed their spears. Its spring-like body directly bit towards the humans' throats. These short, slender three-headed snakes were none other than the mass-produced magical beasts that had followed the mass-produced magical beasts to attack the temporary stronghold in the northeast, Musu Maf. However, many of the soldiers present had been through hundreds of battles, especially the soldiers at the front. They were all the veterans who had lived for half a year. Although the humans did not come up with an effective plan to deal with Musu Maf, the soldiers had figured out the characteristics of these short and thin Musu Maf. After they were ejected, they would be in a state of pause for a short while, as if the ejection had used up almost all the strength in their short and slender bodies. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the soldiers could use the spears in their hands or the swords at their waists to kill them. However, even an old horse would stumble sometimes. Due to fatigue, distraction, and various other reasons, some of the soldiers did not react in time and were bitten in the throat by the three-headed snakes. They instantly collapsed to the ground as if they had lost all their strength. Blood gushed out like a fountain. But in the next second, the three-headed snakes that had bitten the soldiers were pierced by spears and 3 of their heads were chopped off. This was done by the soldiers behind the soldiers who had fallen to the ground. The soldiers in the second row were all veterans. No one gave any orders. When the soldiers at the front were injured or killed, the soldiers at the back had to replace them. If there were any magical beasts, they had to kill them. This was the result of the tacit understanding between the humans after fighting against the magical beasts for half a year. However, because the number of Musu Mafis was much more than what they had encountered in the past, the soldiers who had never experienced such a situation gradually felt uneasy. More and more soldiers were killed by the Musu Maf's sneak attacks. The Musu Maf also became faster and more powerful as they crashed into the fence. Moreover, due to the large number of Musu Maf, the formation of the human soldiers was disrupted. Many of the Yujers and Yulitim stepped on the back of the Musu Maf and jumped over the fence to reach the area between the northern wall and the fence. For a moment, the area in front of the northern wall that had been attacked by the magical beasts was filled with such scenes. Looking at this scene, Wuming furrowed his brows. However, he did not choose to take action. Instead, he continued to observe the situation quietly. Firstly, the commander of the magical beasts must be somewhere watching this scene. Wuming did not need to deal with the magical beasts in front of him. Instead, he needed to deal with the magical beast commanders that could not be replicated and posed a fatal threat to the humans. Secondly, if the humans needed the help of the gods just because of this level of attack, Wuming would be very suspicious of how the northern wall had lasted for half a year. Humans were existences with endless possibilities. How could they be captured just because of an attack of this level? Sure enough, in the next moment, the humans began to counterattack. Bang, 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 3 metallic sounds echoed throughout the northern wall. Wuming focused his gaze and saw that it was Leonidas who had climbed up the northern wall and was knocking on his shield. When the soldiers heard the 3 knocks, they didn't hesitate to retreat back into the north wall. Naturally, the magical beasts would not give up such an opportunity and began to pursue. However, in the next second, they were greeted with a rain of arrows. Chapter 955. Countless magical beasts that charged forward were covered by the rain of arrows. The larger Yulitim and Wujer were covered in arrows and couldn't be more dead. Although Hu Xiao had scales on its back, it wasn't indestructible. Its eyes, joints, and other weak points were its weak points. Under the rain of arrows, these weak points were naturally hit. The short and thin 3-headed snakes weren't spared either. After being ejected, they temporarily lost their ability to hide and could only wait for death. Only the Musu Mafu that hadn't escaped from Mu Xiao whose Xiao scales were lucky enough to escape. However, there were only a few of them left and they couldn't do much. In an instant, the attacking magical beasts were all killed. Wu Ming couldn't help but nod his head at this scene. The rain of arrows was shot by the archers hidden in the battlements of the northern wall. Now, Wu Ming had completely figured out the hidden purpose of those archers. When the magical beasts attacked, the archers hid and didn't come out. It was obvious that their mission was to cover the soldiers who were fighting on the ground. When the soldiers couldn't hold on and retreated, the archers would shoot thousands of arrows and stop the magical beasts. At the same time, they would become the temporary main force and kill all the magical beasts that entered their shooting range. Moreover, because the humans retreated into the northern wall after Leonidas knocked on the shield 3 times, the archers didn't have to worry anymore and directly shot at the magical beasts. However, there were still a large number of magical beasts that flocked towards them from afar as though the rain of arrows was nothing. That was indeed the case. After all, the archers didn't have unlimited arrows. The scene of thousands of arrows being shot at the same time was only because they had enough arrows at the beginning. Gradually, the archers' arrows were used up. As though they had foreseen this scene, more and more magical beasts rushed towards the northern wall. However, Wu Ming saw a few divine power seals, Dinger, on the northern wall moving. It was not the Dinger that Zhuge Kongming had modified. It was just an ordinary Dinger. However, no matter how ordinary the Dinger was, it was still a powerful weapon. As if it was turned on, the Dinger made a clicking sound. The barrel rose and lengthened a lot because of the extension. The sharp cone-shaped muzzle was aimed at the sky at a certain angle. The safety at the back of the barrel was opened, and the Dinger was ready to fire. The archers were still sniping at the small number of magical beasts below the northern wall, while the Dinger was aimed at a large wave of magical beasts not far away. Dinger, fire! Following Leonidas' furious roar, the order to launch the Dinger was transmitted to the person in charge of the launch. In an instant, the rain of light that started from the center of the northern wall flew into the sky. Then, the rain of light, which was free falling due to gravity, directly hit the second wave of magical beasts as if it had predicted the attack. Asterisk boom. Asterisk although it wasn't as big as the mushroom cloud, it was still a spectacular explosion in the wilderness north of the northern wall. The second wave of magical beasts was almost completely annihilated. Then, several gates on the northern wall were opened again. Many logisticians and even soldiers came out from the gates. The soldiers went straight to the magical beasts that had escaped the net. Wu Ming thought that the logisticians would deal with the few human corpses, but instead, they collected the arrows shot by the archers. I see. This is a very thorough plan and cooperation. Wu Ming nodded and expressed his approval once again. First, the ground troops would contain the magical beasts, then the magical beasts would retreat when they broke through. Then, the long-range troops would harvest the nearby magical beasts. Finally, the Dinger would be used to finish off the magical beasts. Then, the Dinger would be used to send people to collect the arrows while the magical beasts couldn't rush over. It had to be said that this was a complete and extremely effective plan. A large number of magical beasts had been killed or injured, and although the human side had also sacrificed themselves, in terms of numbers, even if they could not be compared to the magical beasts, it was still an extremely small number. Before the next wave of magical beasts arrived, Wu Ming flew to the top of the wall and found Leonidas. Very good defense, Leonidas. I even suspect that if the hot spring gate had given you a more suitable geographical location, you would have been able to stop the Persian army with only 30 people. You're exaggerating, Sir Hyunryong. Leonidas knew that Wu Ming was just being polite. After all, Leonidas didn't think that he could stop the Persian army with only 30 people. When he tried to stop the Persian army with only 300 people, he also didn't have the confidence. But now, Sage King Gilgamesh provided Leonidas with excellent geographical and human conditions. Whether it was the North Wall or the Uruk soldiers, they played a key role in protecting the North Wall from being breached for half a year. It was like a big gear and a small gear that played a key role. And Leonidas was just the oil between the gears. By the way, what's so special about those arrows? Wu Ming suddenly asked. Sure enough, you found it. Leonidas said with relief. How could Wu Ming not find it? He didn't care about the bodies of the dead soldiers but collected the arrows first. Not to mention other things, the North Wall had the support of the Uruk, so how could there be a shortage of arrows? It was really strange. Moreover, even if there was a shortage of arrows, there was no need to be so anxious. It was obvious that he had overdone it. Unless there was a special effect on those arrows. Previously, when thousands of arrows were shot, the magic beasts were easily killed. Although they still couldn't hurt Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, who were covered in scales, the dense arrows were still able to hurt them. Their eyes, joints and other fragile parts of their bodies were still damaged. Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao were also enhanced magic beasts, so they were easily killed. Therefore, there was an 80% to 90% chance that there was a problem with those arrows. As expected of Lord Sage Dragon. It's just as I've guessed. These arrows are special. They've all been enchanted by Lord Strategist. They're special arrows that are effective against magic beasts. The magic beasts have been enhanced 3 months ago. When facing magic beasts like Mu Xiao, Hu Xiao and Wugger, ordinary arrows couldn't completely pierce their bodies. If the arrows were ineffective, it meant that humans would lose their long-range attacks. Without long-range attacks, it would be impossible for humans to compete with the beasts. At that time, the military counselor knew about this and began to modify the arrows. Chapter 956. Since he still had some free time, Leonidas started explaining to Wu Ming. However, the ordinary arrows used by the soldiers have to be modified into enchanted arrows that can pierce through the beasts. It's troublesome and the cost isn't low. So the military advisor gave up on the idea of time-consuming and laborious. Instead, he enchanted the arrows to achieve the effect of piercing through the beasts. As long as the arrows could pierce through the beasts, then everything would be fine. As for the problem of not dealing enough damage, Leonidas didn't think about it. After all, the soldiers relied on quantity to shoot arrows. As long as they could break through the defense of the demonic beasts and pierce the arrows into their bodies, then everything would be fine. The current scene was the best proof of that. Once again, Wu Ming looked at Zhuge Kongming with new eyes. Sure enough, Zhuge Kongming didn't stay idle after being summoned. He did a lot of things. However, even if it's just a light enchantment on the arrows, it's still not a small task for the military counselor. Although the military counselor modifies some of the arrows every day, in order to avoid wastage, we always collect the arrows after fighting against the magical beasts. In any case, the demonic beasts would not react to the arrows. They would neither attack nor use the arrows. Therefore, every time the demonic beasts attacked, the logisticians would retrieve the arrows while the soldiers would rest. After all, fighting against the demonic beasts would cause a lot of physical and mental fatigue. But when the number of beasts was too high, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would be needed. When the number of beasts was too high, the soldiers would listen to Leonidas' orders and return to the North Wall. Afterwards, the soldiers on the North Wall would use the seal of divinity, Dinger, to aim at the beasts in the distance and bombard them. As for the nearby magical beasts, they were left to the archers to deal with. Alternatively, they would send melee soldiers to attack them in groups, relying on numbers to kill a single magical beast nearby. It was ironic that the beasts who had the advantage in numbers were killed by the humans. After that, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would block the beasts and create a gap in their attacks. The logistics personnel and soldiers had the opportunity to collect the arrows. At the beginning of the implementation of this strategy, the humans frequently made mistakes. After all, there were a lot of uncertainties in the strategy. For example, the speed of the beasts, where the seal of divinity, Dinger, shells should be fired to effectively block the beast's movement. There was also a series of problems that the logistics personnel couldn't efficiently collect the arrows due to the high frequency of the beast's attacks. In the end, Zhuge Kongming, as the military advisor, and Leonidas, who was in charge of the front lines, came up with an effective plan. Gilgamesh looked at it and made some changes, and this set of plans to deal with the magical beasts was settled. Moreover, because the logisticians had a recycling tool that King Gilgamesh had given them from his own treasury, the speed at which they collected the arrows wasn't slow. After Gilgamesh saw the report, he took the initiative to give the logistics personnel the tools that had the effect of collecting the arrows from his treasury. Although it's not as efficient as this king's treasury, these tools are enough for you. It will probably increase your efficiency by a few times. Go and fight the beasts for this king with gratitude. These were Gilgamesh's original words. However, the morale of the soldiers rose one by one. It had to be said that after Gilgamesh gave the tools from his treasury to the front line, it did indeed increase the efficiency of the logistics personnel in collecting the arrows. This was much more reliable than simply using the treasures as artillery shells. Standing on the north wall, Wuming looked outside. Sure enough, the logistics personnel without weapons were all carrying square boxes. They were quickly moving between the piles of arrows and the corpses of the beasts on the ground. Whenever the logistics personnel who were collecting the arrows got close to the piles of arrows, the arrows on the ground and the corpses of the beasts would automatically be collected into the boxes on their backs. There are some good things in Gilgamesh's treasury. No wonder Ishtar has been coveting it. Wuming didn't know what was in Gilgamesh's treasury. After all, the treasury didn't belong to him. He didn't need to care about what was in it. But now that he looked at it, there were some useful things in Gilgamesh's treasury. Now that he thought about it, Wuming regretted that he didn't take anything from Gilgamesh's treasury when he left Uruk. The items in his dragon's nest dimension were almost used up. The number of tools that he took from Nasrik's treasury had also decreased to the point where he could see them all at a glance. Last time, he didn't take anything from Gil. This time, should he take something from Gil? Wuming was a little conflicted. But he had to wait until everything was over before thinking about it. Right now, he had to focus on the beasts. Bang! 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 Another 3 metal collision sounds were heard. This time, Wuming could hear it clearly. Because the one who made the sound was Leonidas, who was standing beside Wuming. As if it was a signal, the soldiers and logistics personnel outside the north wall stopped their movements. They didn't care about the enchanted arrows on the ground or the corpses of the beasts. They turned and retreated towards the north wall. Because the beasts were coming again. The smoke caused by the Dinger gradually dissipated. Countless beasts were rushing towards the north wall. The number of beasts was several times more than the total number of beasts that attacked before. Looking at this scene, Wuming couldn't help but frown. This wasn't a good sign. The attack of the magical beasts this time, regardless of whether it was the frequency or the number, made Wuming shocked. There were still a lot of enchanted arrows outside the north wall. If the beasts attacked like this every time, then it was only a matter of time before the north wall was broken. But if there was a beast commander, then the north wall would be broken in an instant. Seeing so many magical beasts, Leonidas decided not to let the soldiers shoot at them with their arrows. Dinger, ready. He directly ordered the soldiers to use the Dinger. It was simple and crude. Fire. Along with Leonidas' order, dozens of Dinger on the north wall once again fired bullets filled with magic power. Boom! 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 One after another, explosions broke out in the field outside the north wall. Because of the explosions, a cloud appeared in the eyes of the people on the north wall. This was a scene full of art. If one ignored the beasts, you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.